Well, isn't this lovely? Hello, brilliant entrepreneur, and welcome to episode number 400 of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. And recently, I found out that only 11% of podcasts make it to 50 episodes, and a further 90% of those that make it past 50 episodes do not make it past 100 episodes. So even just the fact that this podcast is still going means that it is in one of the top 1 to 2% of podcasts in the world, which is really fascinating to me because it's simply because I keep recording it. And in fact, I think you only need 21 episodes of a podcast to make it into the top 1% these days. So it's not a lot of podcast episodes that need to exist for you to be more tenacious and have more staying power than other people. And so to celebrate 400 episodes, I recently asked listeners of the podcast to submit questions and that I would do episode number 400 as a Q&A. And we have some fantastic podcast-related questions, some fantastic questions about business, accessibility, social media, all sorts of things. So we are going to have some fun conversations today. Everyone who asked a question for episode number 400 will have all of their details linked in the show notes of today's episode. And I'll also provide an index of questions over with the show notes of today's episode as well. So if you go to tashcorbin.com/400, there you will find all of the relevant links and show notes for today's episode, as well as an index of the questions asked, who asked the question, and links so that you can go and check them out on social media or check out their websites. So without further delay, let's dive into this one. It's episode 400. Let's go. I'm Tash Corbin, and this is the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. Okay, so the first few questions that I'm going to answer are related to podcasting and the podcast. The first question is from the fabulous Lou Kozlevcha. Hi, Lou. And Lou is a digital marketing specialist who helps businesses to grow and get found by their most connected audiences. Lou has their own podcast where they share lots of helpful information and advice. Lou has done some Facebook ads management for me in particular as well. I know that Lou has some brilliant Facebook ads packages. And also, I recently saw Lou is helping people with websites. So very cool. I absolutely love seeing people getting the assistance and support that they need from experts when it comes to digital marketing. So thank you so much, Lou, for your contribution to all of our business success. And Lou asked, is the reason you continue doing your podcast now the same as when you started it? And actually, the answer is no. When I first started my podcast, I already had a YouTube channel, and I'd been running that since I started my business in 2013. But when I started the podcast in 2015, podcasting was not necessarily new, but it was definitely taking off as a format for sharing business advice in particular, but podcasts were popping up left, right, and center. And being discovered by new audience members was one of the most prominent driving factors for starting a podcast. These days, getting found by people who don't already know you on podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that kind of thing, is pretty rare. And so instead, my main driving factor for keeping the podcast going is that this is one of the ways that I can nurture the relationship that I have with my existing audience. It's a way to share lots more strategic and practical content that's very searchable. So if you haven't yet discovered it, the podcast search function is really spectacular. So if you go to tashcorbin.com/search, that's where you can search any of the podcast episodes, but also underneath podcast episodes and over on the sidebar, there's a search bar there, and that is specifically searching the podcast. And so there would often be times in the last few years where people would ask me a question, and I think I'm going to get that question a lot, or I've already had that question 20 times. So I note it down to make it a podcast episode. Then I can just refer people back to it. So for me these days, the podcast is far more about nurturing an existing audience than it is about finding a new one. But I will say that I have experimented with some Facebook ads that direct people to podcast episodes specifically, and they have been fairly successful. So that's certainly something I'll continue to experiment with this year and beyond if it is effective. Then the second question that I wanted to ask straight after comes from the amazing Christine Collins, who is from Transform Create. And Christine is a mindset and messaging support specialist for solopreneurs who write their own content. And Christine asked, how do we know if a podcast is the right step for our business? And if we decide it is, what's the best way to get started? Christine also asked if that is different or the same when it comes to being a speaker. So are there situations where it's not recommended as part of a business model, or you're not ready to be a speaker in your business model? So the first thing I would say to the question about being a speaker is that I don't think that there's any situation where I would say being a speaker is not a great fit for your business. But I would say that I think a lot of people in the early stages of business have far higher expectations about being hired as a speaker than I think is necessarily aligned with their business journey. So I have previously done podcast episodes and Facebook Lives before where I've talked about the fact that sometimes in your business, especially in the early phases of your business, it makes sense to just take all the speaking opportunities you can get. And sometimes that means they're going to be free or they're going to be to relatively small audiences. But it's brilliant for practicing your presentation skills. It's brilliant for practicing your messaging. And it's brilliant for developing that stagecraft and stage presence, especially for in-person events. But also, stage presence is important when you're on Zoom as well. And being able to captivate a crowd and keep their engagement and keep their focus is something that we need to learn how to do as speakers. So I would say there isn't ever really a business that I don't think fits the being a speaker model, but having a super profitable business just being a speaker is a very different proposition to using speaking opportunities or being a speaker to support your client attraction process and growing your audience, getting in front of new audiences. Speaking can really supplement the other activities that you do for audience growth really beautifully. On the podcast specific side, the first thing I would say is that for most businesses that are a personal brand, I do recommend you have some form of what I call feature content. So that is not social media posts where it's that short form, long form, visual, video, that kind of thing, but some form of feature content where it's a little longer form and it can be embedded onto your website and therefore used for SEO purposes, as well as building trust and connection and providing value to your audience. And so if you don't currently have a preferred medium for your feature content, then a podcast can be a great one because it's audio only. You can do video ones, but I've gone back to audio only because I found that people were delaying watching the videos because if the video exists, they want to watch it on video. They don't want to just listen to the audio. But to watch the video, they really feel like they need to be sitting down at their desk. They need to have a notebook in front of them. Whereas people are far more likely to listen to podcasts as they drive or as they walk or as they do other activities. And so even just in moving to audio only in March 2024, like a few episodes ago, I've seen a huge spike in people actually listening to the podcast episodes again. And so I'm very happy with the decision to go back to audio only. It's easier for me and it seems to be far easier for listeners as well. And I understand some people are a bit sad that they don't get to see my face on video as I'm recording podcasts and those sort of things anymore. But it actually means that I'm showing up and doing far more live video content. And I'm creating more video content for other things like social media and shorter form content as well. So I think it's going to end up being a win-win-win all round that the podcast goes back to audio only. And a podcast is such a powerful way of sharing that feature content because compared to some of the other mediums, it's actually a little easier in most cases. And it also can meet lots and lots of different roles in your business as well. So the options when it comes to feature content would be written content, audio only content, or video content. And I know some people do what I used to do with the podcast where they have a video, they make it audio only on the podcasting app, and then they have an article made out of the transcript. So therefore they're technically doing all three at once. But we do want to understand what is the primary way that you are actually using that content. And so for me, podcast is the easiest because I can talk off the top of my head pretty effectively. I'm not sure if you've noticed, but being audio only, I don't need to be camera ready. I don't need to have certain things in place. I don't need to have all my backdrop set up and everything like that. So it does make it easier for me to get it done. Also, I can edit myself as I go, which I find really helpful because I do sometimes stumble across words or I have a bigger gap. And where I was doing it as video podcast episodes, it was really time intensive and expensive to outsource editing of the video because it does take a lot more work to edit video like that. And because I can edit as I go, it just means that it gets done straight away. I don't have to expect anyone else to do the editing for me and work out what I was trying to do in that episode. And that means that the episodes are shorter for people to consume, but I'm also far more succinct in the way that I talk about the concepts I'm covering in the podcast as well. So you've got audio only, video content, or written content as in articles or blogs. I found that writing blogs or writing articles wasn't necessarily my go-to medium. And I found it quite challenging because I still wrote in a very professional tone when I first started my business. So when I first started, I did video on YouTube, but I also did do written blogs. But those written blogs were written as though I was writing for a government organisation or I was writing for some stiffs in suits. And I found it challenging to write conversationally when I was writing longer form content, which is why I ended up moving to a YouTube channel and then deciding to get started with a podcast back in 2015. So to answer your question, Christine, I would say that if you are struggling with consistent feature content, i.e. your longer form content, I would recommend trying out recording a few podcast episodes and seeing how you go. If it's something that feels like you could get quite good at this pretty quickly, it feels like you get to show up and really talk about the things that you want to talk about and you can present some concepts in a really succinct way, then a podcast might be the perfect fit. It might actually be a really good fit for you. I don't think it's necessarily the stage of business or the type of business that dictates whether a podcast is the right fit or not. I actually think it comes down to what is your zone of genius? What is your primary way of sharing that feels like it comes the most naturally to you and that you can do readily and consistently? Because some of the most important factors when it comes to feature content is how consistently can you get it out and how quickly can people consume it. And so I think that those two factors mean that podcasting is pretty sexy, even though podcasting for cold audience reach these days isn't necessarily as common. It's more of a nurture strategy in your business. So the two things I would recommend doing is, number one, just ensuring that you do have some form of feature content. And if you don't, podcasting could be the fit. And then number two, looking at your client attraction process and seeing what part of the client attraction process are you mostly going to be covering with a podcast? And is that a part of your client attraction process that needs some extra love and attention? So that's probably the two ways I would decide. We have two more questions that relate to speaking in particular, but do relate back to sometimes being asked to be a speaker on other people's podcasts. So I'll answer those two next. The next question comes from the fabulous Vanessa Nixon from Herbs of Grace Healing Arts. And Vanessa is absolutely brilliant at supporting people with their health and well-being using natural therapies. And as with everyone who's asked a question, we'll link back to them in the show notes of today's episode at tashcorbin.com patreon.com/400. So Vanessa said, I've found that a marketing strategy that feels really good to me is guest speaking. I've done quite a bit of guest speaking over the last couple of years, probably around 50 events, including podcasts, summits, and virtual retreats. While I've had a handful of new email subscribers from some of these speaking roles, I haven't gained any new clients. Do you have any tips to make guest speaking a more profitable marketing strategy? Such a great question, Vanessa. And my number one rule of thumb when it comes to guest speaking opportunities anywhere, regardless of whether it's free or paid, whether it is a large scale audience, online, offline, in person, is I always offer a free resource that people can access by joining my mailing list. And the reason why I do this is because I know that the likelihood of someone buying from me the day that they first hear me speak is fairly low. And rather than try and fight that and create urgency through marketing strategies or tactics, I just accept it and I roll with it. And so my number one piece of advice for turning any new subscriber into a paying client is to ensure you've got a very well-balanced client attraction process so that you aren't just overly focused on reach, i.e. getting in front of new people. You're also giving a lot of attention to nurturing the relationship that you have with every single one of those subscribers, not just on a one-to-many basis, but also on a one-to-one basis. And then the invite stage, which is letting people know about your products and services and inviting them to take a step closer to those products and services before then pitching the product. So you're allowing people to do some discernment about whether they want to hear the pitch. You're also doing some qualifying as to whether it is a good fit for them and whether it's going to help them, and then doing that sales pitch to get the sale. And so the first thing I would recommend is just reviewing your client attraction process. And if you want to fast track the time frame from which people join your mailing list to the time in which they purchase from you, the strategies that I recommend are to focus on one-to-one at each of those stages. So one-to-one nurture, one-to-one invites, one-to-one sales conversations and pitches to talk about your services. Because they are far more high conversion, they get a higher percentage of people taking the next step. So therefore, you need far fewer people in your audience to be making more sales, which I absolutely love. And then the second piece that I look at if I want to turn that list growth into sales is ensuring that I've got very strong messaging. So I've done quite a few podcast episodes about messaging over the last few dozen episodes. We'll pop some links to a couple of them, but I also have a free resource that I share very prolifically, which is my core messaging document and the training that goes with that. So I would absolutely be looking at, are you expressing the value proposition of working with you really clearly for your specific niche? And are you bridging new audience members from what they think is where they need to solve it or what they think the problem is to helping them have that light bulb moment of, oh, it's actually a more complex issue, or, oh, I'm looking at this through the wrong lens or from the wrong angle. So the very basic example of this I often give is that a lot of people, when they first join my mailing list, when they first come and start following me on social media, they think that they need to get more followers on social media. They need to get more reach on social media. And yes, I do create lots of content that helps them to do that. But in doing so, I also help them to see that more reach on social media or a bigger audience doesn't necessarily convert into more clients. And if you want to convert that into more clients, you need to do the nurture and invite stages of your client attraction process really well. And so that's the light bulb that my audience needs to have before they're even willing to look at the solutions that I have on offer, because they don't think that they have a messaging issue, or they don't think that they have a nurturing their audience issue. They think they just have a reach issue. And in most cases, for online business owners, that's not correct. They don't have a reach issue. They actually have either a lead generation issue, or they're not nurturing their audience in a close relationship enough, or their messaging just isn't expressing that value proposition effectively. So that would be my advice, Vanessa, is number one, just try and get everyone onto your mailing list because they're most likely not going to buy from you straight away. So we just kind of acknowledge and accept that. And then secondly, looking at the ways then that you convert people from your mailing list into being paying clients and how you nurture and invite to get that conversion and really strengthening the value proposition and the bridge messaging that you share as well. Thank you so much for that question, Vanessa. I hope you found that helpful. Our next question comes in from the fabulous Belinda Rachel. Belinda is from Your Social Bee, and I know Belinda is an expert at SEO and in particular using Pinterest as a strategy to attract more visitors to your website and grow your business. And Belinda asks, Tash, do you have any tips around submitting speaker applications? How detailed or concise should submissions be, and what makes an application stand out from the rest? So the first thing I would answer is the detailed versus concise. I would always opt towards detailed over concise because the more information you give me, the better I am equipped to make a decision. But that's particularly in relation to applying for speaking positions at events and also applying to be a guest on someone's podcast. In other spaces, you might find it's better to be short and sharp and just do some qualifying first. Like if you're sending an email to see if someone's interested, then rather than just jump straight in with the pitch, I would ask a couple of questions first and then be nice and concise in that email. So you're not wasting people's time having to read through this big long email about how you'd be an amazing guest when you haven't even asked, are they taking speaker applications? And sometimes people send me big long emails about why they should be a guest on my podcast. And I have a form. Like if they had just said, are you taking guests at the moment? I would have been able to direct them straight to the form and they wouldn't have wasted their time putting that long email together anyway. So then in relation to making an application stand out, and I have reviewed over 700 speaker applications in the last 2 years, so I feel like I'm quite qualified to answer this question for you. The first thing I would say is focus on the audience that you are pitching to be a speaker at their event. So the audience of the host. That might mean that you don't necessarily directly speak about your work, but you speak about something related instead. And I have a really good example of this actually, which is Shannon Ichikawa, who spoke at the most recent Heart-Centered Virtual Business Conference. And I've told Shannon this story because she was actually present at one of the final sessions where we were doing a Q&A. And I gave this example because I think Shannon really nailed it when it came to applying to be a speaker at conference. Shannon actually applied via our Pitch Fest competition, which we run on every conference, virtual conference as well as our in-person conference. All ticket holders are invited to pitch to become a speaker. And Shannon was one of the winners of Pitch Fest for this virtual conference because her submission, whilst it wasn't directly related to her work, it was spectacularly focused in on the audience. So for that same speaking opportunity, I received applications that were about parenthood, but not every person attending my event is a parent. I received applications about specific health issues and health conditions. Well, not everyone who attends my conference has that health condition. So it was really interesting to me to see how many applications really hadn't considered what's best for the audience. Instead, they were pitching to be a speaker based on what was best for them as to how they could best show up in their zone of genius or how they could best demonstrate the work that they did in their business. Shannon is actually a relationship coach. She helps people to welcome lasting love into their lives. So she mostly works with single people and she's helping people to, build an amazing relationship or find an amazing partner. And so it would have been very tempting, I'm sure, for Shannon to pitch to be a speaker talking about how to have a better relationship with your business, because she's all about relationships, or how to attract your soulmate clients, right? Because that's what she helps people to do in relationships, is about, attracting those amazing fit, that person who's, someone who's really that love of your life. And if Shannon had pitched that, she wouldn't have been selected as a speaker. And that's where I think being a little bit more mindful of the audience pays off. So Shannon actually pitched to talk about how laughter is the best medicine, especially as a business owner. And the pitch was exactly focused on what the type of people who attend Heart Centered Business Conference would adore. It was something where she gave some really great examples of what people could get out of it, and the processes and some exercises she would do. And it really caught my eye. It was the first one when I was scrolling through, I highlighted it green because I was like, ooh, that's really interesting. I'm going to read that in full, because I was just kind of skim reading at first. So even though Shannon didn't talk about something that you would have assumed was aligned with her specific business, she got in front of every single person who attended that session, and she is presented as a speaker to every single ticket holder, every single person. And so when she introduced herself and talked about her work, the people in the room who were single, who wanted to welcome lasting love, they had their ears pricked up, right? Oh, that's really fabulous. But she didn't need to forego every other person in the room just so that she could show up and talk about relationships or something very obviously aligned with her business. And then when Shannon shared a freebie, because we have no selling from the stage at virtual conference or at the Heart Centered Business Conference, but the speakers can share a free resource. And when Shannon shared one, she shared one that was about attracting a partner. So she wasn't going to get as many people signed up to her mailing list from it, but she got the exact right people from the conference signed up to her mailing list. And I think it was a genius move on her part, and I've told her that already. I'll also link to Shannon's business in the show notes if anyone else is interested in hearing about it. But I do think it's really powerful to make that decision to focus on the audience rather than focusing on how you can present yourself in the best light, most aligned with your specific topic area that you want to be known for in your business. Now, the second thing I would recommend when presenting a pitch to be a speaker at an event or to go on someone's podcast is to be sure to highlight to the person you're applying to the benefits to them as well. So it's not just about the audience. You definitely need to center the audience in the topic and the way that you explain it, but also make sure that you're making it clear to that person that you're going to be a great speaker to work with. Perhaps you'll talk about how you're going to share that podcast episode. If you're selected to be on a podcast, what are you going to do when the podcast is actually published? Are you going to expect them to just distribute it everywhere, or are you going to tell your mailing list about it? How many people are on that mailing list? Are you going to share it in communities like the Heart Centered community? You know, a lot of people that I work with one-on-one, this is one of the things we do when we set up their speaker profile and when they're looking to get more guest opportunities. Well, I say to them, well, let's go and look at what are the groups that you would share a podcast interview in? How many people are in those groups combined? And so they're able to put in their application, I will be sharing it with a range of different Facebook communities, as well as social media profiles that are specifically focused on XYZ audience, and they have a combined audience of over 100,000 people. And so, well, that's very appealing. Even if your mailing list is only a few hundred, you are able to share podcast episodes in the Heart Centered community. You're able to share podcast episodes on your own social platforms. There are other Facebook communities where you can share them as well. And so saying that you're going to be proactive in sharing it is a powerful message for the organizer of the event to read. In the any other information to add column, a lot of people left that blank when they applied for conference last time and the time before. But there were a couple of people who said, I'm so excited to go to this conference, and if I am selected as a speaker, I will be shouting about this from the rooftops, and I will be recruiting as many people as I can to come and attend this conference. Well, I'm definitely going to pay attention to that piece of information. I also had a few people talked about how they are very flexible on what time they can be selected to speak. They're flexible on the topic area. If there's any adjustments or changes that I would recommend, they're open to hearing about it, and that they will be very responsive. Someone even said, I just want to let you know that I've marked you as a safe sender. So if you send any emails, I'll get them straight away and they'll go to the top of my inbox. So that's telling me they want to prioritize their responsiveness. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that every single time, and I'm not saying that that would overcome a topic area that wasn't necessarily a fit for my conference or event. But if it's a close call, you can believe I am going to be looking at those extra details and pieces of information as well. Number 3, I would recommend that you focus not just on the topic and the process of what you're going to be sharing, which a lot of people did for the Heart-Centered Business Conference in 2023. We had a lot of speaker submissions where they're like, I'll cover this, and then I'll cover this, and then I'll cover this, and then I'll cover that. And so they were giving me almost like the structure of their presentation, but they didn't actually tell me, but what will people get out of that? What's the outcome of people having done that, of people having learned that? It was very process orientated rather than speaking to those outcomes. What are the benefits to the attendees of having witnessed that workshop, having implemented the strategies that you're going to be sharing with them? So don't just focus on your process or the things you're going to say, focus on the outcome and the benefits to the listeners. And number 4, I would recommend that you get good at talking yourself up. And there are several ways that I ask people when they submit their speaker applications to speak about themselves. I'll say, ask them, where have you spoken about this before? And a lot of people will say, I've done a couple of podcasts. Okay, great. Someone responded and said, this has been one of my webinars that I've run consistently. Okay, great. But I've just given you a brilliant opportunity to speak highly of yourself, to tell me all the ways that you've spoken about this before. I also think that a lot of people, when they apply, don't think it's as valuable to me to know that you've run your own things. So a few people who applied a couple of years ago, when I asked, well, where will I have seen you speak about this before, or where have you presented on this topic before? A few people said, oh, not really anything else. I've done my own stuff, but no other conferences. But I didn't say, at what conference have you presented on this before? I instead asked, like, where have you presented on this before? And so if I get the feeling that this is your first ever speaking opportunity, then that's going to make me be a little more nervous about that. But I don't mean, when I say speaking opportunity, I don't mean being on someone else's stage. I mean, have you chosen yourself? Have you organized your own events? Have you spoken on your own webinars? Can I watch the replay of one of those? Do you have a link to that somewhere? If you've been on other people's podcasts or you have your own podcast, send me links to the ones that really help you stand out and shine through. I will listen to those. I'll have a quick watch of some of those little videos as well. If that gives me some more confidence in your ability as a speaker and your stage presence or your screen presence, then that's going to weigh into the decision. And I think that particularly for women and marginalized people, we're so used to being told not to talk highly of ourselves, or we're punished for talking highly of ourselves. And so we've got out of the habit. But you are submitting a speaker submission, an application. That is when you need to speak highly of yourself. You need to be confident about your abilities. You need to be confident not just in your topic area, but also in your ability to hold an audience's attention. And if you're not confident in that, then get some practice in and don't wait for someone else to give you that opportunity. In the past, where I've selected speakers for Heart-Centered Business Conference, and it's been very obvious that it is their first ever speaking opportunity, it hasn't been as effective for the audience, and I need to take that into consideration. It's particularly challenging. Sometimes I find if I have someone who's speaking on stage and they aren't as experienced or they haven't had as much practice, they will make the first 5 minutes of their presentation all about how anxious they are and how nervous they are, and apologizing already for their anxiety and how nervous they are. And whilst I think it's fine. It's absolutely lovely and humanizing to say, whew, I'm a little bit anxious, but I'm going to give this my best go. I think that's fine. But when we're 5 minutes in now and I feel like I'm holding space for you instead of you holding space for the audience, I think that that's problematic. And so I need to have that confidence as a conference organizer, but also as a podcast interviewer, that you know what you're talking about, but also that you have practiced this, that you've done this before, that this is not your first rodeo. And then the final piece of advice I would give is, if you can include links to places where you've done this before or examples of you speaking previously, please, please, please include them, because that is absolutely something that I would consider, and that's something that I'm looking for, especially where I'm trying to decide between a number of different people who might have similar topics. Then I'm going to take into consideration your stage presence. Then I'm going to take into consideration how engaging your previous presentations were. So don't forget to include those links. Thank you so much for that question, Belinda. Hopefully you found that one really helpful. And also, I will flag, I'll likely do another podcast episode in the next few months where I give more detailed advice on how to bump up the strength of your speaker application, because we will be opening Pitch Fest for Heart Centered Business Conference 2024 in Noosa for all of the ticket holders. And then we will be doing the Pitch Fest for Virtual Conference 2025. So that is definitely aligned with the kind of content I'll be creating over the next few months. And because you're a Pinterest expert, Belinda, I'm going to use that to segue into the next question, which comes in from Lisa Tuig. And Lisa is a messaging and brand voice specialist. She helps people in particular who've come from a corporate background or a professional working background to let go of that stiff, formal style of language and communication as they move into online business, because we know that conversational language and allowing your personality to shine through and being more personable on social media is critical to standing out from the crowd and creating that cut through. So Lisa is absolutely spectacular at helping people to really craft an amazing presence online, and that messaging and that voice and that little bit of extra sassiness or humor, whatever it is that you want to showcase that's going to really help you to stand out. That's what Lisa does. And Lisa asked, what is my view on Pinterest and what is my view on bundles? And so I thought I would answer the Pinterest one straight after Belinda's question, because she's a Pinterest specialist, and then we'll talk about bundles. So quickly to talk about Pinterest, I would say that I love Pinterest. I've definitely used it as a user in the past. I used it for some wardrobe stuff, some visual things when I first started my business, just curating a feed of pins and images that I needed for different events in my life in the past, and also even some things around interior decorating, that kind of thing. I will say though, I don't use Pinterest for business as a user, as in I don't go and look on Pinterest for ideas or information or anything along those lines as a user of Pinterest. I'm certainly there for more visual elements, but definitely not for business podcast episodes or advice or any of those sorts of questions. And so because I don't use Pinterest as a user for business, I struggle with understanding how other people might use it for business and how having my presence on Pinterest would really work for my ideal client in particular. And I also have a bit of a rule of thumb for myself, and that is, if I'm not nailing the platforms I have already, then I'm not going to embark upon experimenting with new ones too much. And what I often do is I will hire a professional to do that little bit of that strategy for me in the first couple of months, just to see if there's anything major that happens, or, you know, if it has a huge impact on the results in my business. But with Pinterest, it's not necessarily an aligned thing for my market in particular. As I said, I absolutely love it. I know a lot of people do great things around SEO and they have great results with Pinterest. I think it's probably better where the user is already there for that particular topic area rather than trying to shove business-related topics in front of people who are there trying to work out which couch they want to buy. And so for that reason, I don't use it as a business owner. I've experimented with it here and there over the years. I've had someone do some Pinterest stuff for me in the past, but the time frame that was required in order for it to really be returning any results was just far too long. And I also know that I have not nailed my Facebook strategy. I know what I'm doing on Facebook, and yes, I have a lot of connection, I have a lot of growth on Facebook, but if I had an extra $1,500 a month, an extra 5 hours a month to put into social media strategies, I would put it straight back into the social media platform that already works for me. I would put it into scaling and growing and being even more connected on the spaces where I already have momentum and have traction. And so for those reasons, I don't use it myself, but I absolutely understand why it's so valuable. And I understand for a lot of businesses, it's a very sexy platform. But for me, I'd much rather focus on Facebook as my primary social platform. And then the other thing I should say as well is that I know my website is broken. My website is terrible. And so it would be like trying to put a Band-Aid on a broken arm, doing Pinterest strategies to SEO my website, because my website needs a lot of work. That's the result of hiring 2 web developers back to back who abandoned the website build partway through the process and disappeared. And so in both instances, I just had to get Dee Dee, my admin, my VA from my team, to help me kind of wrangle something together to try and fix it. And so I know that my website is terrible. So it's very slow. There's some things in the back end that make it really difficult to maintain and update and get it optimized. There's a lot of improvements that need to be made structurally to that website. And so until I've taken care of all of that, it would be silly of me to get overly focused on SEO in particular. And Pinterest really is an SEO strategy. To answer your second question, Lisa, what's my view on bundles? Well, I recently made the decision that I will not be participating in any future bundles for at least the next 2 years. That probably tells you all you need to know about my view on bundles, but I do want to break it down for you because I think there's some really interesting insights here. Before I say anything about bundles, I want to say I'm in a very privileged position. I have the cash flow and the money capacity to grow my mailing list and grow my audience by paying for ads. I also have a very large existing audience and a very strong existing social media presence. That means that bundles for me are delivering in a different way compared to some of the other opportunities that I have available to me. And I understand that not all business owners have those opportunities available to them. So not everyone has the capacity to pay for ads at this point in time. Not everyone has the capacity to be invited to be a guest on other people's podcasts and get in front of 1,000 to 2,000 new audience members every time, right? Not everyone has those other opportunities available to them. So when I consider participating in bundles, that's based on, well, what else could I do with that time and what else could I do with that money as well? So I'm very aware that I'm sharing that from my experience as a business owner with the stage of business that I'm at. So number one, I find that the types of people who sign up to and buy bundles, because bundles are very low ticket products, are often people who want to sell low ticket products as well. They're the type of people who will participate in bundles. They're the type of people who are looking to sell templates or short courses or low cost things. And that's not what I teach in my business strategy. I teach people to get really profitable really quickly by selling high ticket and using high connection, high conversion sales and marketing strategies. I'm also a big proponent of consent-based marketing and not pushing people through deadlines and countdown timers and fake countdown clocks and upsells and downsells and tripwires and all of those sorts of things. But those types of strategies are used quite prolifically in bundles or by the kinds of people who contribute to bundles and sign up for bundles as well. Before I talk about my most recent experiences, I just quickly want to explain the structure of how a bundle works. So what it usually involves is that there is a bunch of contributors and an organizer for the bundle, and the contributors all put something into that bundle that normally would be a paid product at a certain level. So I've placed my planner in there before. I've done it with courses, self-study courses that I've offered. And so where I would normally charge, say, $295 for the course, I will put it into the bundle, and then the bundle is $97 early bird and $197 full price, something along those lines. But when people purchase that bundle, they don't actually get enrolled in your program straight away. They then need to go through all of the items that were included in that bundle, and they opt in for the ones that they want out of it. So the biggest bundle that I've participated in the last 18 months was Lizzie's Christmas party, the most recent one. And there were over 300 items inside that bundle that people could decide whether they were going to grab it or not. And I've also participated in other ones where it's been 50 items or there's been 75. So it's ranged between 50 and over 300 items within that bundle itself. So when you buy the bundle, you then need to go and opt in for the things out of it that you'd like to take, that you'd like to have access to. What that means is that a lot of people sign up for the individual items out of the bundle that they're looking for, and then they immediately unsubscribe from that person's mailing list because they're opting into 50 people's mailing lists in one day. That's not going to be something that they can manage in their inbox. So I totally understand why people do that. I've also found that people are setting up Gmail accounts that are specifically for bundle stuff. So they've set up a whole new email account, and some of them are called things like put your spam here at gmail.com, something like that. And so those email addresses aren't the email address that I would normally get from someone when they opted into a freebie for my mailing list. If people sign up to come to one of my webinars, they sign up with the email address that they use the most, not this separate one that they never check. In addition to that, even though I didn't send my newsletter to people who signed up for those bundles in the first 4 to 6 weeks, and even when they opted in for the thing out of the bundle, I said on the thank you page and in the welcome email, I know your inbox is going to be so busy right now, so I'm not going to send you my newsletter. I won't send you any aggressive follow-ups or anything along those lines. I will send you a couple of emails just to remind you to finish the course, or a couple of emails to check in and see how you're going, but you won't hear marketing stuff from me unless you reply and tell me that you want it. Even though I did that, and then I didn't send a newsletter to them in that first 4 weeks, they still unsubscribed at a rate of about 50%. And it's been fascinating for me, in particular in the last 3 months, because my unsubscribe rate from my newsletter has been well under 1%, usually under 0.5% for a very long time. Like, I will send my newsletter out, it goes to 12,500 people, and I'll have 6 people unsubscribe, right? Super low unsubscribe rate. But the last few newsletters that I have sent, I've had 70 people unsubscribe, or 40 people unsubscribe. And whilst that's still a very, very teeny tiny number, it's huge compared to what I'm used to seeing. I don't look at unsubscribes from my mailing list unless there's a big spike. And this one is a spike and it's sustained. So I've been going through each week and seeing who's unsubscribing from my list and where did they come from. And 95% of them have come from a bundle of some sort. So the people who join the mailing list are less engaged. They're more likely to unsubscribe. They're generally lower value emails in that the person actually doesn't read those emails consistently. And then the other thing that I've found is that a lot of people have replied to my emails and said, wow, this is really amazing, but I am not doing that type of business. I don't think that this is the type of business that I want to do. I don't do that kind of marketing. I don't like social media. And so the people who I'm attracting in, because it's someone else's brand, it's someone else's audience, in a lot of the cases, it just means that the quality, the connection, the alignment with the work that I do just isn't there. And so I'd rather those people unsubscribe from my mailing list. That's totally fine. But when I think about the time and energy that I've put into being part of those, the marketing time and space that it took up, because if you participate in a bundle, there is a requirement that you promote that. And it really needs to be a 3 to 4 week window where you're exclusively focused on promoting that in most cases. And so there's an opportunity cost that I can't promote other things. And I've put a lot of energy into promoting it. When I promote a bundle, I want to feel like I can stand behind the other items that are in there and provide some recommendations. So I generally go and sign up for it, and I go and enroll in a bunch of different courses, and I check out a bunch of the products. And so that's a lot of time for me to be able to ethically and in an informed way promote that offer. And then in a couple of those cases, I paid to be a sponsor. And so the money that I put in to sponsor that, I would say was not worth the investment. I would have been far, far better off putting that money into Facebook ads and having 5,000 people join my list from Facebook ads that are completely aligned, that are there for me and me alone, that are deeply engaged, that I can build a relationship with, and I'm not competing with 300 other providers or 50 other providers at the very same time to try and build that relationship. I just think it's a far higher quality of relationship that I build when people come into my mailing list from my organic and paid social media strategies than when someone comes onto my mailing list from a bundle. Now, the last thing I do want to talk about when it comes to bundles is that I've also, in the early days of my business, participated in a couple of bundles where there was just no one else taking any responsibility for doing any of the promotion. And I've even had clients who've participated in bundles and they were told it was going to be promoted to a mailing list of 5,000 people. And then between us all, we've got 500,000 people on our combined mailing list. And then she's had 15 people sign up to her thing out of the bundle. I had another client who had 120 people sign up to her thing out of a bundle, but the organizer was saying they had had 7,500 people purchase the bundle in the 2 weeks prior, and there just was not that amount of traffic going on. There was not that amount of people going and checking things out. And so you really need to trust the person who's organizing it. You need to have faith that they are in integrity and that they are being transparent. You also need to believe that all of the other participants are going to do the promotional work. And a lot of people who organize bundles talk about this quite prolifically, where they say everyone signs up to a bundle saying they're going to do all of this, they're going to promote it to their list, they're going to promote it on socials, and then the minute that the bundle is launched, there's crickets. No one's talking about it. No one's promoting it. And so you've really got to know that you're in a bundle with some action takers, with people who are committed, they follow through, they do a good job, and also that they deliver a high quality product. Because I do know that for a bundle that I participated in recently, the organizer has said that she was absolutely devastated by the low quality of products that were submitted into the bundle, and that people had talked them up in their applications so highly and said it was going to include X and Y, and it's going to have this, and it's going to have that. And then when she goes and has a look at the final product, once they've actually set it all up, it's literally a 45-minute video, and it's just free information that they could have got from listening to a podcast. And so you really need to have a strong relationship, not just with the organizer, but I also think it's important to assess who else is participating, because that could be brand damaging to you if you're participating in something where people are really unhappy with the experience. And I would say the last 2 bundles that I participated in, that's some of the feedback that I've got from my warmest audience is, I don't understand why you're doing this, Tash, because this is really lackluster compared to the experience of working with you and the experience that I have with you. And it wasn't necessarily because of the bundle organizer. I should say that really clearly. It was because of the other bundle contributors. They were less than ideal. They really didn't do a great job. They used very much fear-based pressure, agitation kind of marketing strategies. They sent 15 emails in the 4 days that someone signed up. Now, I actually did sign up for about 50 items out of a bundle in January this year. And I was just sharing to my business manager, Claire, that since signing up for those 50 items, I have received over 7,500 emails. And it's only 4 months ago. 7,500 emails in 4 months. And it's only 50 providers. And so I think that that's absolutely atrocious, right? That's really over the top. And I have unsubscribed from most of them this week, actually, because I was like, you know what? There's no way I'm ever going to get through all of that. And to be honest with you, if someone sent me that many emails, like I would expect in a 4-month period to hear from someone 20 times. I get their newsletter each week, that's 12, and then maybe 6 extra emails because I haven't subscribed to anything else from that person. I haven't further opted in, signed up for a webinar. I haven't opted in to participate in any of their launches of whatever the next thing is. If I had signed up for their webinar, then another 8 to 10 emails, sure, that's fine. But I would say 20 emails per person. So that would have been 1,000 emails maximum that I would be expecting to get from those 50 providers. But I've had 7.5 times that amount. And that's 7,500 unread ones. I probably read the emails for the first month. So I would say I've probably received over 9,000 if I think about what I got in that first month and the ones that I was deleting out really quickly when I first signed up. Now, truth be told, I also signed up with a brand new email address because of my experience previously with buying bundles. So I don't participate in bundles as a contributor anymore, and I won't be doing that for at least a couple of years. I really need to focus on my own audience growth strategies. And I also want to rebuild my open rate, my super low unsubscribe rate with my mailing list as well, because there are so many emails on that list now that just aren't high quality, that aren't opening my emails, that aren't reading my emails. And so it has dropped my open rate from my newsletter, which was getting up to around 55%. Just before Christmas, and it's dropped back down now to just under 40%. And so that makes me look like I'm not as good of a sender, like my deliverability will be impacted by that. And so I really want to focus on really nurturing my list again, really re-engaging my list again. And to be quite honest, I'll do a little bit of a list cleanse, I think, which I don't normally do regularly. I know that I have people on my mailing list who open an email once, twice a year, and then all of a sudden, a year later, they're opening every email again. I totally understand the float in, float out nature of a lot of people who follow me. So I don't do a lot of that list cleansing, like get rid of anyone who hasn't opened an email in the last 6 months. I don't think that that's a really strong strategy, and it doesn't really align with the way that I do business. But I will likely do some clearing out of email addresses that I can see are obviously just for bundle signups, or email addresses where the person hasn't opened a single email of mine, those sorts of things. But I'll be very careful about how I do it, but I do think that's something I'll need to do as I now regrow my list with my own strategies, my own social media marketing, and those sorts of things. So Lisa, hopefully I've answered your question there. As I said, that's all through the lens of I have the money and the capacity to go and get people onto my mailing list in other ways. I understand if you're really struggling with your audience growth, that this could be a really sexy opportunity. It could be a really great way to get some new audience members and to create some of that extra engagement on your socials, to then create extra list growth. I think there are some absolute benefits to being in bundles, but I just don't think it's for me at this stage of my business anymore. The next question, which is also a very good segue, comes from Kristan Kershaw. Kristan's from Supporting Balance, and she helps people in understanding why they have symptoms beyond the reasons that are commonly given, like you're just tired because you're a busy mum or business owner or whatever, or it's got to be low iron causing XYZ, and instead really understanding what's underneath those expressions and those symptoms. And as with everyone, we'll link to Kristan's business and socials in the show notes of this episode. And this is question number 6, if you want to skip down to it. Now, Christine asks, I'd love to hear ideas on how you personally prioritize or suggest others prioritize information development and sharing in different locations for promoting your business. Facebook versus blogs versus podcast, for example. I realize these often interlink and reference each other, but I'm more curious on deciding how much you want to aim for your audience to come from socials versus via searching online in other routes. Now, Christine also gave a little bit of background in that she has had a big focus on consistent social media content. However, over the most recent history, not so much blog posts that are SEO'd and getting people who are searching. And so she's just wondering if maybe she needs to realign where she's focusing her audiences coming from. So this is such a great question, Christine, and my answer is a little bit involved, but I think you'll find it really helpful in discerning like what goes where and what the jobs are of those different platforms. So one of the things that I teach is the client attraction process. And what that does is helps us to map out the journey that people take from finding you the first time to actually buying from you and being a paying client. And so that client attraction process follows the structure of people going from reach, i.e. they've seen something of yours, into nurture, which is building a relationship, then invite, which is where they are discerning if your offer is the right fit for them or not, and then convert, which is where they make the decision of whether they're going to purchase or not. And then we have delivery. So when you deliver really well, then you get more referrals, you get more repeat clients, all of those sorts of things as well. So in mapping that out, what actually happens is you're able to see what is the job that is not being done or needs to be done more effectively, rather than making decisions about what goes where simply based on random rules or how it works. Because you can actually use a blog as a nurture strategy, but you can also use it as a reach strategy. You can use Facebook as a nurture platform, but you can also use it as a reach platform. And you can use all of those things to invite people to check out your services, and you can also promote your paid products and services in them. So it can be a conversion event as well. So what I would be looking at instead of what goes where is first and foremost, what part of your client attraction process really needs some attention right now. So if you know that when you reach new audience members, they become raving fans and you build a relationship with them really well, really quickly because your newsletter is really valuable, or your social media content includes lots of Facebook Lives and lots of people are like, oh my gosh, I just discovered you and now I'm your number one fan, right? You'll see that your nurture is working effectively because you're building new relationships with people consistently. If that's not happening, if you're not nurturing very well, then I wouldn't fix a reach problem first. I would fix a nurture problem first. And something that you talked about, Christine, was that you weren't seeing a lot of engagement on social media anymore the way that you used to. And what that would suggest to me is perhaps if your social media has been very consistent over the years, it may be that the content that's being shared doesn't necessarily do the nurture piece as well. It's more that structured, very repeat kind of style of content, or here's a tip, here's a question, here's a this, here's a that. And it's a little predictable, or it doesn't feel like you're there. It doesn't feel like I'm engaging with or talking to Christine when I'm here on this platform with you. And that can sometimes happen when you outsource or if you hire VAs, or even if you're repurposing previous content very consistently to get that nailed. I find when people really have their Facebook strategy dialed in terms of consistency, we then need to give it a little bump up in terms of engagement after a few months of that working like clockwork, because we don't want the clockwork to become robotic and disconnected. So that would actually be where I would focus your energy, because if you are seeing a drop in engagement on your socials, then that to me says you're not effectively nurturing relationships with those platforms. And we want to do that first and foremost before we then go and grow the reach. So hopefully that all makes sense. The second thing I would say is then if you're not blogging anymore, review your website visitors and your website traffic and see, are you still getting the fresh visitors that you used to? Or are you able to maybe get 3 blogs out over the next 3 weeks, really focused on being optimized for the types of thing your audience members are Googling and are searching? And even if it doesn't have a call to action or it doesn't get them onto your mailing list, you can see, well, what is the overall impact in terms of the number of visitors to your website, and see if that would actually be a really good reach strategy for you. But also, one of the things that happens when you use SEO and blogs in particular as a reach strategy is that it often is faster to build the relationship as well and faster to convert, because you're not putting your content in front of someone who's not looking for it. It's search engine, right? So if someone is searching what to do about low iron, or because I'm using your example in how you introduced your business, or low iron fatigue supplements, right? If that's what they're looking for, then you are finding someone who is actively seeking a solution right now. That's very different to posting on social media and the person sees your post about the top 3 ways to get more iron into your system if you're tired, which I know you wouldn't do. I'm just making this up. But if they saw that and they were like, oh, I was thinking about taking on, I am a bit tired, right? You've got to get them into problem-solving mode when you're reaching them on social media, whereas when you reach them with search, you are reaching them as they are looking for a solution or as they are looking for an answer. And so you will find that it is a faster conversion rate in most cases. So I would say that it's not necessarily about what information goes where, but really looking at what job each of those platforms is doing, and is it doing it effectively? So if your social content, which is where you are mostly going to be interacting with your existing audience, right? If your social content is not doing that, if you're not getting the interactions, if you're not finding that it's fast tracking people into being, self-identifying as a lead or reaching out to ask how they can book in a session with you, then I would definitely be looking at nurture on your social platforms being the first place you focus. And then in answer to your question about blogging, I would experiment with it. If you know that you have a highly searchable content area and that blogs have worked for you really well in the past, maybe even just doing 4 blogs over 4 weeks. So you've got a 1-month experiment and you can see, well, what is the overall impact on website visitors? What is the impact on people opting into your mailing list from the website? What is the impact on people booking in for things or even filling in your contact form? I know when I've done well with prolific, effective, search optimized podcast episodes, I've had more people fill in the contact form. Now, I don't use my podcast as search optimized content these days. It's mostly focused on nurture. And so what I would do with the podcast is very different to if I was doing it for reach or if I was doing it for fresh audience. And so that's where I prefer to divide by client attraction process rather than by platform. Which links to question number 7 really beautifully. And that came in from Simone from Willy Wagtail Editorial. And Simone said that she loved the approach of creating and scheduling batched social media content, but are there tricks or tips for applying some formatting to the text, such as bold, italics, and color? Some people's posts appear consistently, and I don't know how to do that. But I would actually say, Simone, not to worry about that. The first reason is that functionality isn't actually available on Facebook pages organically, nor is it available on Instagram. Because of that, the way that people get formatted text on those platforms often is through different keyboards or different tricks that use special symbols instead of just using the letters. What that means is there's an accessibility issue because people who use screen readers will not be able to use those to read your content. So they are going to be missing out on your content. It actually reads it out really weirdly. But then the other thing is that in a lot of cases, what you think is going to make your text look more fancy or stand out or more on brand is actually making your content look more like an ad. And the number one type of post that people will skim right past on social media is an ad. So what you would want to do on social media instead is actually have your posts look like native, organic, social posts. In a lot of cases, that just means keep it nice and simple and straightforward and don't use that formatting trickery in your copy. This also gives me an opportunity to highlight another piece of advice that I share quite consistently, and that is not to use some of the other formatting tricks that you might see people use when they're posting business content. One of those is when they want to create more and more spaces between paragraphs, putting a full stop on the line so that it actually creates an extra line in your copy. That instantly tells people that that is a piece of business content. And so, because it's not the type of way that people would format a social post, people will be far more likely to skim past it than to actually read it. Another big one is the overuse of emojis in your copy as well. Be mindful that when you do that, you are likely going to be giving off signals that this is a piece of business content and therefore it looks like an ad. People will be more likely to scroll past it. Focus instead on the quality of the writing that you do, which will light you up because you're a copy editor, right? If you write really effectively, you write nice and concisely, you write with personality and brand voice, if you write in a way that people write on social media socially, you are far more likely to get that engagement. You're far more likely to stand out from the crowd, even though it might feel like it looks like the same as everyone else's content. It looks like everyone else's social content, and that's exactly what we're aiming for. And the reason why I mentioned accessibility was because of your next question, which was about accessibility in social media posts specifically. So in your question, you'd said you'd heard that some fonts are easier to be read by all users. Yes, that is the case. So if you're putting text within an image on social media as well, I do know that it is recommended not to use custom fonts because a lot of screen readers aren't able to pick up that font and those words, and also not to overly use brush scripts or those curlier fonts and instead use fonts that are quite plain. Now, I did see you also asked about image descriptions and alt text, those sorts of things. I use a plugin that ensures my images can be described by a screen reader. They are at a cost for you to use them, but I'm also not necessarily an expert on the accessibility side and those industry standards. I hired someone previously to help me with accessibility within my course and with some of my marketing and content, but I definitely still have more to do in that space. And I also wouldn't like to take the place of an accessibility expert and their role in supporting business owners to ensure that they have that accessibility nailed. So that is my experience and a few of the things that I do. But I would absolutely recommend finding some people for whom this is their business. And they often have lots and lots of great advice on their websites and on their socials. And then if you've got something in particular that you want to get help with ensuring it's got that accessibility, then you're able to book in sessions with them. The next question is a little bit of a 2-for-1. The question itself came in from Darlene Redman. Darlene is from the Aligned Path with Darlene, and she supports business owners to learn how to tune in, receive, and trust their intuition so they can have a healthy relationship with their business and become confident in the messages they receive from their business as well. Darlene asks, my question is, how can you stand up for yourself and politely tell someone, even a friend, that unsolicited advice isn't appreciated? I had a friend tell me I was self-sabotaging because I wasn't doing certain marketing techniques, like having a professional profile instead of a personal one. I was feeling worn out. It had been a long day, made me feel terrible, especially when she told me business wasn't for me if I wouldn't do those marketing techniques. Now, the first thing I want to say, Darlene, is sounds to me like you handled it quite well. And I think there are actually 2 pieces to this question. The first is, how do you handle it in the moment or when people are trying to give you advice? But also the second one is, how do you ensure that it doesn't get you further down or make you feel wobbly, especially when you're already feeling a bit wobbly or you haven't had the best of days? So first and foremost, my approach comes from Denise Duffield-Thomas. Whenever someone tries to give me advice for my business, or they ask it in a bit of a dismissive way, or I'm just not interested in divulging, and Denise calls it bean dipping, because basically what you do is just a quick acknowledgement and then change the subject. And she uses bean dip as the example. So if someone asks you, how's your little business going? You say, yeah, it's going great. Have you tried the bean dip? Or if someone says, hey, you know what you should do is you should change your profile to be a professional one, you can say, oh, cool, I'll look into it. Have you tried the bean dip? So you're taking responsibility and you're being proactive to shift the conversation elsewhere. And what you're doing is creating a bit of an energetic boundary around it. Now, the reason why I love bean dipping so much is because it also is quite preventative in terms of how I then feel when they're giving me advice or asking about my business. It stops me from going on that downward spiral or feeling like I have to justify myself or, give a response to someone's unsolicited business advice. But I do understand that sometimes we've had a bad day or sometimes we're just feeling a little more vulnerable. So what's really important here is having your own processes and your own rituals or strategies that you can use to build your resilience and build your self-belief, even when someone might make a disparaging comment or give you advice that isn't actually in your best interests or that you're not interested in hearing. If we are getting further wobbled by those comments or questions, that's often a sign that looking after our own mindset, looking after our own strength and resilience is something that can require attention. So I often say to Davey, I'm the flame keeper for my business. I'm the one who's responsible for ensuring that I feel confident in its direction, that I feel really stable in its foundations. And if I'm not feeling like those things are strong, if I'm not feeling like my mindset is really good about all the things going on in my business, that's my responsibility to really take care of that. But I do also want to say that sometimes it does get to us. I remember just a few weeks ago when I was having a lot of different tech troubles, I had been working on a sign-up page for the upcoming Client Attraction Challenge because I was creating a whole new sales page for it, whole new messaging. I've added some extra functions and features and things that we're going to be doing together. And I've also restructured the process just a little as well. And I'd been working on this sales page for a couple of hours and the site crashed and it glitched out and I lost my work. And I had even been doing this before my birthday so that I could have my whole day off for my birthday. And I was really looking forward to some downtime. And unfortunately, I lost everything. And David is such a practical, helpful kind of person. He's always in solutions mode. He's always trying to look for a way to fix things. So I said to him, I was really upset. I was like, oh my gosh, I just lost 2 hours of work. It completely glitched out. I can't believe that this has happened. And the least helpful thing I think you can say to someone who's just lost a lot of work they've done is, did you make sure you were saving as you went? Or maybe next time you should save as you go. Now, I can't remember which of those two things that Davey said, but I knew in that moment that he had said that because he was trying to help. And so I was feeling quite good about myself, and I knew as well that I had made a conscious choice not to save as I went because the system had been a bit weird. The platform I was using, I was finding that every time I went to save it, it would freeze for a few minutes, and then I would have to close out of everything and re-log back in and get my Authenticator app out and log back in that way with my double login details. And so I just thought, I'm going to power through, I'll just get it all done in one go, and then I will save it at the end. So I already had known that it was a conscious choice that I made not to save as I went, and it's probably why it glitched out and I lost it. They were probably doing some system updates in the back end, which is why it wasn't saving properly. And so in that moment, I was able to really hold it together. But there have absolutely been times where if I had had that exact same situation and he had said that exact same thing, I would have had a complete and total meltdown. So actually having some of these experiences can be a really helpful opportunity to observe how we are feeling about our business, about ourselves, about our results, and about what's going on. And if we are a little bit wobbly, you're going to be far more likely to be tipped over by one of those comments, by someone giving unsolicited advice. So keeping an eye out for that in a proactive way will help prevent it. But then also, if you do have one of those experiences and you do feel like you just had a little meltdown, just pay attention to that and make a note that it might be a good idea to look for some ways to build that resilience, or maybe have a look at what's going on from a mindset perspective. Now, the final thing that I want to share, I think I read it in an Amy Poehler book or Tina Fey, but I think that they were quoting someone else as well. So please forgive me for misquoting this. But it was basically that the insults that hurt the most are the ones that we believe are true deep down. And so the other piece that I would be looking for is, where do I have a fear that something may be true, or that there is something that I need to do? So for example, if you have been like unsure about how to use social media effectively, if someone gives you social media advice specifically, you'll be more vulnerable to that advice or criticism because you are already a little bit worried about it. Does that make sense? So if you were feeling really resilient and strong in your social media strategy, someone giving you advice on how to do social media wouldn't necessarily cause as many wobbles. Or if you were feeling really confident in the longevity of your business, someone saying, I don't know if your business is going to make it long term, would not affect you the way that it does if you have had some worries about the longevity of your business. So it's not only an opportunity to look for that mindset piece, but it is also an opportunity to really create solidarity and strength in your belief in your strategy, in the things that you are doing to grow and build your business. If what you're currently doing isn't working, then it's a great opportunity to go back to the drawing board, reassess your foundations, and rebuild from a position of strength, so that when someone provides feedback on a certain part of your business or your messaging or whatever it might be, then you're not going to feel as impacted by it because there's no worry or fear or underlying anything from your part that they are tapping into. I know for myself, for example, if people give me insults about not being heart-centered or not being generous, I am impervious, because I know how generous I am. I know how heart-centered I am. I know how giving I am across the board in my business, in my life, with my family, with my friends, like everywhere. And so anyone trying to use that as an insult on me, it just doesn't land. And it's really funny because whenever there's like something going on in the Heart Centre community or on social media, a lot of people think it's a good insult to use on me. Like, oh, that's not very heart-centered, because that's the name of my conference and my Facebook community. But honestly, it's the least helpful. It's like the least powerful insult that you can use on me. But if you use an insult on me where it's something where I am a bit worried about that, or I do feel like maybe I'm not as strong there, or there's something going on for me, then that's the one that's going to hit, right? That's the one that's going to land. And so it's just a really powerful opportunity to pay attention to what that is showing for you and where maybe there is some wobbliness that we can reinforce and strengthen so that you will feel less, less vulnerable to some of those comments and that advice. Okay, well, that was question 9, and this actually leads in nicely. You can see I found all these lovely segues into a question that was asked by Ellie. So that will be question 10 in the show notes. Ellie Yule from Wise Woman Wisdom is a women's mentor, helping women to find balance, clarity, and energy so they can create the life they want. As a Celtic wise woman, I do this the Wise Woman way, have a box of techniques and therapies to give them the tools they need to succeed. And Ellie's question was, when are you too old to run a successful business? And so, Ellie, I would probably direct you back to my answer to question 9 for Darlene and let you know that there is no such thing as being too old to run a successful business. So on top of the mindset piece and some of the comments that I made in relation to Darlene's question, I would also give you this very practical tip, and that is go and curate your social media newsfeed to be filled with more people who inspire you and show you that anything is possible. Follow people with disabilities. Follow people who are older than you. Follow people who started later than you. Follow people who have smaller audiences than you. Follow people who show up less often than you, right? Go and see those examples of success done really differently. One of the challenges with social media is that our feed, our news feed, can become very homogenous because the algorithm is designed to show you more content that you're likely to engage with. So it's going to show you content that's similar to content you've engaged with in the past. So something that I do every quarter in my business is I curate my feed as part of my CEO date with myself. And that involves going onto both Instagram and Facebook, looking at my newsfeed and seeing, is there content there that's not helpful for me, or is there content that just all seems to start looking the same? I consciously choose to unfollow or see less of this type of suggested content for those things, and then I will pay attention to what it is that I do need or do want to see more of in my newsfeed. So I will go and follow far more diverse people on socials. I will follow more creators who are doing slightly different things to the way that I do business, or different models of business. I will go and look for people who have success in an area that I want to have, and they have similar attributes to me that I think are the reasons why I can't do it. So it's a really powerful way to ensure that you are collecting evidence over and over again that this is absolutely possible for you and that there's no such thing as too old. Our brains are actually wired to collect evidence of what we already believe to be true. So if you believe that you're too old to be a business owner or start a successful business, then your brain will unconsciously look to collect evidence to reinforce that belief. So you need to be mindful about collecting evidence to the contrary, collecting evidence to prove what you want to carry as a belief, what you want to understand is possible for you. So curating your social feed and even the emails that you're receiving in your inbox can make a big difference to that as well. Question number 11 came from the fabulous Tiffany Surata. She's from Tiffany Marie Studio, and Tiffany is a spectacular tech whiz. I absolutely love what Tiffany does. She in particular specializes in helping you ensure you've got the right mix of different platforms, tools, and technology in your business to align with exactly what you need and what works for your business and your strengths and how you show up. And I also do know that Tiffany is a recently qualified period coach. So something that Tiffany has been exploring and doing recently is looking at how to integrate her understanding, knowledge, and expertise in the business space and the technology space with this newfound qualification and this new expertise in working with your cycle, running your business and planning in a way that really aligns with the different phases of the moon or with your menstrual cycle. And so I loved the question that you asked, Tiffany, which was, at what point does a concept become yours? For example, you're working with a business coach that teaches A, B, and C, and you then take that and expand and tweak it to become D, E, F. But A, B, C is still at the core of what you are teaching or doing, but it's not quite the same, or it's a different spin or a different take on the concept. So this is a pretty tricky one to navigate, Tiffany. And I would also say it's very different depending on who the mentor was, what the concepts were that you learned and how original and unique they were, but then also the relationship that you have on an ongoing basis. Now, in most cases, we would love to assume that if you're learning something from a coach or a mentor, and then you are doing that with the intention of then going out and sharing it with the world in your own way, they would, of course, be so excited and happy for you to make it your own and put your own spin on it and really just get out there and share it far and wide, because you are now a contributor to a wave of change that they have created. But I do also know that some people have the experience of their mentor not being happy about that, or they have a feeling that their mentor is not happy about that. I have a practical example of this where a friend of mine became a certified instructor in a particular modality, and she had an amazing relationship with the mentor, but she was a really savvy marketer. And so she was able to get out there and promote herself as a facilitator. And all she had to do was just ensure that she clarified and always attributed that the intellectual property of the original concept and modality belonged to someone else. And so she did that really spectacularly and did a great job. But the more successful she became in her business and in her marketing of her version, the more her mentor was watching her. So her mentor would sign up for every webinar and every challenge whenever she was launching. Her mentor came to every Facebook Live she did. Her mentor commented on all of her posts on social media. And so she could see that it was creating this sense of like, I'm being watched, everything I do is being watched. I can absolutely see from an external perspective that the mentor is feeling really wobbly because her student is now outshining her. She's making more money. She's very well renowned for the work that she's doing. And even though the mentor is being attributed for creating the IP, it is like really uncomfortable. The ego gets involved in a lot of these situations. And unfortunately, we can't always be very mature about all of these experiences. So I think that demonstrates really clearly that it's different in different situations. And even when you feel like it's completely clear and you know everything's going to be okay, sometimes things just get a little bit wobbly. And so there's no one hard and fast rule about how to make it your own or when it becomes your own, but there are a few things that can help you to establish your own intellectual property, your own processes, and really differentiate yourself from that mentor or coach. The first one is your niche. So in a lot of cases, the mentor or coach that you learn from is doing it more broadly, right? They're not as niched in who this is for or who they are marketing it towards, because they are teaching it to anyone else who wants to use it or teach it. And so often the mentor is the unniched, and then the students apply it to a specific niche, and that then provides differentiation. So for example, in relation to transformation around mindset, well, there might be a general mindset transformation that is being facilitated, and there's tools and strategies and steps that you can use. But once that is applied to a specific niche with specific lived experiences and more tangible examples, and once we actually start to craft the specifics of what you're doing, because we can do that when it's a tighter niche, then all of a sudden it starts to look different, it starts to sound different, and it starts to feel like it's more yours. Now, if there is part of the process of you learning requires that you always disclose that the intellectual property that it's built on belongs to your coach, well, then that's something that I would continue to honor and continue to do effectively. However, in a lot of cases, it's unspoken. And so what I like to do in that instance is just be really mindful about ensuring that we are not competing with each other for the same client. And that's where niching is so powerful, because you know who their niche is. You know what the tangible application is of what it is that they're doing for the people they are focused on targeting. And so by differentiating based on niche, what you're doing is then you'll have differentiated messaging, you have differentiated examples, you have differentiated processes that you take people through, and therefore it's creating more and more separation from the original concept. Now, the other thing I would recommend is having open communication about it. I often have people ask me about certain things that I teach in the Takeoff program or in some of my other programs, or things that I've taught someone in a VIP session, and they have said, oh, look, I'd really love to do something like that with my clients, but I'm worried if I'm taking your intellectual property, or is there something that I need to do in order to make it my own? I'd rather us have that conversation than not, because then I can be informed about where they're taking it and what they're doing, but also I get a say in how we move forward from there. In most cases, I say, oh, just take it, just use it. I mean, if you're happy to say it's mine, I'd love that, but there's no requirement for you to do that. Now, it's interesting because every time I say that on a podcast, I then have like 6 or 7 people start using things of mine, and they didn't actually have a conversation with me about it. They just took that me saying it on the podcast means I'm okay with it. I will say in most cases, it's totally fine. But the fact that they asked is the reason why it's fine. And so I would absolutely recommend that if you are working on something that's new, built off something someone else has done, then once you feel like you've really created your own mark on it and you've really differentiated, then I think it's worthwhile having a conversation with the original mentor and just saying, hey, I just wanted to share with you what I'm now doing with what I learned. And I just wanted to ensure that I'm not encroaching on any of your intellectual property, and that, you're happy and confident with how I'm moving forward. Most mentors, especially really good ones, would be absolutely open and thrilled to have that conversation with you. And then that can create that assurance for you as well, that you're not encroaching on their territory or, breaching any of that copyright. And then the other way that I differentiate is actually to move away from the original model and create something that's actually my own. So in a lot of cases where I have learned something from a mentor, and particularly even just read concepts in books like the Lean Startup concepts or anything around marketing and sales, those sorts of things, a lot of the work that I have created, a lot of the structures and processes and flowcharts that I've created have actually been in direct response to learning from someone else, but seeing that it didn't apply to my niche, or that there was something flawed in the process in the way that they shared it. So an example of this in my business is in 2016, I was working with a mentor, and they shared with me a concept that wasn't their original work, but they were using as a marketing kind of strategy that they were teaching to others. And that was the problem solution model of ascension marketing. Basically, at its core, this is a marketing approach that is based on getting more and more money out of one individual through ascension marketing. So you're trying to get more high ticket products sold, but you ascend them through different solutions. So you start out by finding people who have a little problem and you sell them the solution to that problem, or you deliver the solution to that problem for free. But in delivering the solution, you also create and magnify the next problem. And then when they get really worried about the next problem, you've got the solution you can sell them. But in that solution, you're also magnifying and bringing up the urgency of another problem. And so this ascension model is basically used to sell people into a $49 product, then a $400 product, then a $1,000 product, right? So you're ascending the money that you're making out of people because you're linking these problems together, and every solution you present also presents and magnifies another problem. And it's a related problem that means that the solution you've delivered doesn't really solve the problem that they were wanting to solve. So I didn't love this model. And what I saw was that it actually needed to be flipped on its head. So in just learning about that process and learning about that strategy, I was able to take a step back and go, okay, well, what do I feel? Why do I feel uncomfortable about this? Well, I feel uncomfortable about it because I don't want to ever sell someone something that doesn't fully deliver. And the other thing is that I see in a lot of cases, people aren't struggling to find people with little problems on the internet. People aren't struggling to find people with big problems on the internet. And in a lot of cases, people want to do work that's deeply transformative and that addresses the root cause of the issue or the bigger picture of the issue. And we have this amazing opportunity with content marketing. So that's actually where the turn process was developed. So if you've listened to my other podcast episodes before, you've probably heard me talk about the turn process, or what I now call bridge messaging. But the turn process came out of working with that mentor. And then as I started applying that turn process with lots and lots of other people and in my courses and in my programs, and then I could see where people were getting stuck on it, or they were asking questions, or they had an issue. So I needed to separate out the bridge messaging from the value proposition. So that's what I did. And so that whole principle, that whole concept has been developed in response to an existing intellectual property model, an existing way of doing something, an existing process. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you are doing the opposite or you're completely changing the way that it's done. You can also do it through the lens of, well, what is missing from this model for your specific niche in solving the specific problem that you help to solve? So you might find that, yes, in general, the ABC strategy that your mentor has taught you is great. It's great for general problems. It's great for, generally understanding how something works or generally solving an issue that someone is facing. However, for your specific niche, with your specific area of expertise, if we're going to really nail this, we need to do D, E, F, and G. And so now what you've done is you've developed further and you've provided far more refinement. You've provided far more context. And in doing so, you've actually separated out or stepped further away from that original model. And so that can often also be a great way to create extra separation and differentiation if that is something that you need to do. Thank you so much for that question, Tiffany. It's such a good one. That was question 11. Let's move on to question 12. And question 12 came from the fabulous Amanda Collins, who is a death doula, poet, musician, and author, determined to live life well until she dies. Thank you so much, Amanda, for your question, which was, if I was to start out all over again, and Amanda put in there shudder in brackets, what would you do first and what would you definitely work towards again? And do you know what, Amanda? I actually don't shudder at the thought of starting my business all over. I really don't. And it's really interesting to me because I probably wouldn't have felt that way up until around 2016 in my business. I felt like, I'd created so much momentum and I was really building on something. And so I did almost have this fear of losing what I'd created or losing that momentum. But these days, having had 8 months away from my business between 2021 and 22, having rebuilt different parts of my business and redefined my messaging and my niche so many times, like honestly, I would have no problem with starting over again. In fact, it's very exciting to me, the idea of starting over. And sometimes I have to be careful that I don't actually like break what I've created in order to experience that feeling of starting out all over. It's why I love working with startups so much, because instead of starting my business over and over again, I get to help other people start their businesses from scratch. And it keeps me abreast of what's going on in the market and online and what strategies are working and what isn't. And it means that I don't ever forget what it's like to be in startup, but it also really stops me from feeling like I want to start something fresh or I want to start something over. I still do buy the occasional URL or domain name here and there, thinking I'm going to start some other random business. But in most cases, the act of buying the URL on its own is enough to stop me from feeling like I need to take that any further. So to answer your question, if I was to start over again, I would basically do it exactly the same, but much faster and with far more confidence. I would be far more resilient to some of the well-meaning but not helpful advice that I was hearing from the people I was following online and reading in some of the business books and those sorts of things that I was consuming at that time, because I was eating up everything I could on getting my business off the ground. So I would run a webinar every 3 weeks, and I would dedicate at least a couple of hours a day helping people one-on-one, anywhere, anyhow, that I could. I would be in free Facebook communities, showing up, answering questions, offering to do free sessions with people, offering to do discounted sessions with people, just eating up any opportunity I could to have one-on-one connection with as many people as I could. And I would happily offer discounted packages and free sessions, and I would invite people to DM me with their questions, email me with their questions. And I'd run that webinar every 3 weeks to be super helpful and super generous with my time and with my attention. One of the things that I heard over and over again when I first started my business was advice around like, don't ever give away sessions for free. Don't ever charge under $197 an hour. You're devaluing yourself. Don't ever this, don't ever do that. Don't answer your emails more than once every 2 days. Like, there was just such weird advice out there. But upon reflection, what I realized was that most of these advisors were doing it through the lens of that's what happened to them. So when they first started their business, they gave away too many free sessions. And so then they started to feel burnt out and resentful. Or they had too many people asking them for free advice in their emails or in their messages, and they started to resent that. And so that created this sense of burnout. But I just want us to stop and recognize that if you get to the point in your business where it's time to tighten your boundaries, you are in demand. You have people who are hungry for your advice. You have people who are asking you questions, who see you as an expert, who value your opinion. So you have done the exact thing that you need to do in order to create momentum in your business. Now, I'm not saying get to the point where you're completely burnt out and you're giving everything away for free, but I'm saying the fear of getting to that point means that a lot of people don't use high connection, high conversion strategies in their business. The fear that you're going to have far too many people emailing you for free advice means that you don't encourage people to reach out on email. But actually, one-to-one relationships are the driver of the early success in your business. And so that is absolutely what I would be doing if I had to start my business over from scratch today. Not only that, knowing what I know now about the structure of a client attraction process, I would absolutely be building that entire thing out one-on-one. One-on-one reach strategies, one-on-one nurture strategies, one-on-one invite strategies, one-on-one convert strategies, one-on-one delivery. I would be unafraid to do everything one-on-one, knowing that when you do it that way, you don't need as big of an audience. You don't need as many people that you're reaching on social media. And also that's when you're able to charge, really amazing prices for your VIP packages, because you're working with people one-on-one. You're conversing with people one-on-one. You're qualifying leads one-on-one. So you're far more likely to get a high ticket sale. You're far more likely to get it converted. And so you need far less leads. You need far smaller lists. You need far less people following you on socials, but you're going to be making more money than the people who are doing it the low touch disconnection way. So if I was to start out all over, that is what I would do first. And then what would I work towards again? Well, I definitely, if I was starting in 2024, I would not start a free Facebook group. I would have a Facebook group for clients, like for paying clients. And that is actually something that I am looking into at the moment, bringing back, because that's actually what I did for the first year of my business. I did have a Facebook group, but it was only for my clients. It was called Tash Corbin's VIPs. So original. And in that group was where I would put any templates and resources that I made. It was an extra high touch kind of space for me to deliver extra value for my VIP clients. At the time, they were the only clients I had. And so I really wanted to give them lots and lots of love. And often I would be working with one client and they would need me to make a template for something or give advice on something. And then I'd think, oh my gosh, all these other people I'm working with, they need this too. So I'd go straight to the VIPs group. I would record a video and post it there, or I'd make the template and I'd share it there. And it was a really great way to create that sense of connection and really build momentum in that community. And so if I was starting my business now, I certainly wouldn't do the Heart Center group for free the way that it is now. But the Heart Center group grew to where it is now completely organically, completely thanks to Facebook recommending it and Facebook's algorithms. So that wouldn't happen now if I started the Heart Center group today. It wouldn't grow to 34,000 people the way that it did. And so I wouldn't then try and replicate that, because I would have to work so much harder to get the same result. And the Heart Center community runs at a loss in my business. I don't actually make a profit out of the Heart Center community. I don't make sales because of the Heart Center community. I don't make a lot of money because people have seen something of mine in the Heart Center community. I spend a lot of money every month on administration costs and looking after that community, but it's certainly not a profitable one. And so I would do it probably as a customer group instead. The other thing I'd probably work towards nailing much faster was consistency of content. So when I first started, I did a video blog on YouTube, and then I also did some articles on my website, and I kind of just did them haphazardly, interplayed between the two. Some weeks I'd put out an article, some weeks I'd put out a video, some weeks I'd put out nothing. And so I wasn't very consistent at growing my list or emailing my list. And so I definitely focus on making sure I nailed that much sooner. And I just pick one content platform, and I would just stick with that for an extended period of time. I think I'd do a podcast if I was starting in 2024, just because I find audio only content is so much easier for me to create. I can edit it as I go, and I don't get as blocked and challenged with creating audio content. So I'd probably do a podcast. And then the other thing I would definitely do differently compared to last time is that I wouldn't create a group program so quickly. So when I first started my business back in 2013, in my 6th month of business, I had a $20,000 month. And then I went to a webinar that was run by a very popular business mentor at the time. And she said on that webinar, if you are still trading dollars for hours, your income is capped. And here I was making $20,000 months. And at that webinar, I became completely wobbly about what it was that I was doing. I thought I'd messed everything up. I'd done everything wrong. And it derailed my business for so long, because in the webinar, she had examples of people who had 30K months and 50K months and a 75K launch, and someone else had a $100,000 launch the first time they ever launched their course, and their course was only $1,000. And so I became immediately convinced that I needed to have a group program. And so I set about building the Takeoff program. And in doing so, I started to give off the message. And sometimes I even outwardly said, like, eventually I'm not going to do any one-on-one work with people. I am going to move to a passive income model, because that was when passive income was like super hot. I know it's making a comeback at the moment, but back then it was very fresh and very new. And so in doing all of that, I went from a 20K month. I then had a 15K month the month after. And then the month after that was still 5 figures. But then I had started to work on the Takeoff program, and I was convinced that I was going to do passive income and all this kind of stuff. And then I launched the Takeoff program, and I had a $3,800 launch. And then the month after that, I had an $800 month. And I took all the cash flow out of my business because I was in such a rush to be in the next model, to go to the next stage. If I was going to do something different, I would absolutely just offer VIP one-to-one services and hang out in that zone for as long as possible, and just keep increasing my prices as demand increased, and use that time to really nail and bed down my foundations and my consistency with my different types of content, my socials, my podcast, my emails to my mailing list, my list growth, my freebies, right? I would just be completely focused on selling VIP packages, and every few months putting the prices up and getting a few more clients in, running my webinar every month from there, and just really focus on nailing all of that down before being in a rush to go to the next stage of business. Because the work and the effort that went into creating the Takeoff program the first time around, because that's the group program that I created, that work and that effort that went into that first time around, it really didn't return on investment for about 18 months. So it took 4 launches of the Takeoff program before I felt like I actually had some form of leverage for my time. Because if I took into consideration the time it took me to build the program, market the program, run the program per student, it was far more than just getting a one-on-one client. Back before I started the Takeoff program, I could get a one-on-one client by doing a single session offer in one of 3 or 4 Facebook groups, and it would sell out. I'd sell 3 or 4 VIP sessions, and then at least one of them, if not 3 of them, usually turned into VIP clients. Like, that's how I did it. And I was so good at that process. I was so good at delivering for my clients. And I never had more than 12 client sessions in a week. Like, I wasn't doing a lot of session delivery. I had a really crazy business model when it was a one-on-one model. And it was just this promise of huge first launches. And honestly, looking back, that webinar was very, very toxic in its marketing approach. It was designed to agitate me. It was designed to make me feel like everything I had achieved to that point was useless. I was no good. I had no idea what I was doing, because the swoop in was that I would then buy their program and everything would be okay. But actually, in buying and completing that program and then creating the Takeoff program and then launching the Takeoff program far too early in my business journey, it derailed my income significantly. And then when I had that experience, instead of going, got to go back to the one-on-one model, because I had been telling everyone, well, I'm going to this passive income model, I'm teaching passive income, and I had a few people who'd finished the Takeoff program, and they're like, okay, what's next? I want another course. I went and made another course, Pilot School, rest in peace, Pilot School. And so I made another course, and I spent months making another course and launching another course, and that course was $98, but the only people who wanted it were graduates of the Takeoff program. And I only had 13 of those. And so I derailed my income even further. And then I doubled down on the Takeoff program and relaunched that. And as I said, that second launch still didn't get me to any kind of profitability or any kind of leverage in my time. And I would have been far better off spending another year, if not 2 years, just selling one-to-one, delivering one-to-one, and getting all of my systems and my marketing and my list growth and my consistency bedded down. So thank you so much for your question, Amanda. I hope you found that one helpful. I think it's always a great concept to just explore and just play with. Like, what if I was starting over? Because in a lot of cases, the things that I say I would do if I was starting over from scratch are things I can still improve or work on in my current business. I can still be far more effective in my consistency of social media content, or far more effective in getting my emails out or podcasts out or whatever it might be. There's still systemization that will help with that. And I make a lot of money when I focus on promoting my VIP packages and VIP work with me, but I don't do it very often. And at the moment, I actually have a lot of space for VIP clients in my calendar because I haven't really been taking any on or talking about it. Now, I am going into a launch of the accelerator, so I wouldn't be doing too much with it at the moment. But anytime I need to raise money quickly in my business, I put some VIP packages together and go and follow up with hot leads and people I've worked with before, or go and share it in my group programs and say, does anyone want some VIP time with me? And I can bring in $15, $20, sometimes $30,000 in under 10 days just talking about my VIP services. And so it's a great reminder for me in what actually works really well in my business and where the easy money is, because I think sometimes we think that the leveraged money or the passive money is far more valuable than the easy money, but in most cases it's not true. The easy money is so valuable, and the easy money is easy, and it's allowed to be easy. So thanks, Amanda. Great question. That was question number 12. And question number 13 comes in from the fabulous Eva Rado. And Eva works with mum entrepreneurs to turn household management into a whole of household responsibility so that they have the headspace needed to grow their business with single-minded focus. And so Eva's question was, I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on the idea of business decision fatigue and how that ties in with decisions women entrepreneurs traditionally have to make in the home, having support, retiring partner, especially from a mindset perspective, but also from strategy, business growth, and timing. And firstly, I'll circle back for those people who weren't part of that conversation, where I talked about decision fatigue as an area that I'm very conscious of in curating my life, not only inside my business, but also outside my business. So something that I never have to do is decide what we're eating for dinner. David will never come to me and say, what are we doing for food this week? We have set up our lives in a way that I can make those decisions in bulk, i.e. I order our meal kits and I order the things that I want, and then it's over to him and the stuff arrives. He cooks whatever he wants in whatever order that makes sense to him, because everything that I've ordered, I know I'm going to want it. I'm going to like it. And then that is all just outsourced. The only thing he needs to know from me is when I want my food. And we do that each night in a CEO date. So we have a CEO date at the end of each day. And that is our setting up for the next day. What does my schedule look like? When do I want food? Is there anything else I want him to do or I need him to do for me, or that would help me to achieve my goals that day? And we have a little pump up theme and some fun things that we do with each other in that CEO date. And so because of that, I don't end up having that wild decision fatigue that comes when you are the decision maker in your relationship or in your household. And I do think that it often traditionally falls on the woman in the house, especially in cis hetero relationships. And if you're a business owner, well, that can be especially tiring and overwhelming. So Eva asked for some more of my thoughts on all of that and how it relates. And so I'm just going to share some pretty broad and general and freewheeling thoughts on this, because I do think it's a very nuanced conversation. And I also know that I'm coming from a very strong position of privilege here, because David doesn't have to work other than the little bit of stuff that he does for me because my business is so successful. Plus, we don't have children. Plus, I have a university level education. We don't have like huge complex lives at this point in time. We used to with my chronic illness and some other things, but we simplified our life right down. And so when it comes to like eliminating decisions out of my life, it's a lot easier compared to someone who has kids or someone who has an ex-partner and they do shared custody, or someone who has a lot of complexity in their life, or they have elderly parents that they're looking after, or, there's so many reasons why someone might have a lot of decision-making responsibility. But I also do think that I am someone who is mindfully and consciously curating a very chilled out existence. And I think that a lot of people hold on to their I'm a control freak personality trait as like a badge of honor because it feels safer. And as someone who in my corporate career would have easily and happily said, look, I just have very high standards. If you want something done, give it to a busy person. That's me. I'll take on more responsibility. I need things to be a certain way. I was that person where I held high standards and I used that as a reason for needing to have control over things and needing to be the decision maker. I also know that in that corporate environment, information is power. So having control over some of those things was actually putting me in a power position that as a woman in a traditionally masculine workplace, I needed in order to feel like I was able to sit at the same table as the dudes. And so whilst I don't in any way like judge or think anyone has to listen to me and my opinions on this, I just wanted to mention that because I definitely have had a lot more conversations with people over the last year about being a chilled out, it's okay, near enough is good enough kind of person, and how our attachment to our personality being that I'm a total Virgo or I'm an absolute perfectionist or, I'm the control person or I'm the organizer. Sometimes that comes from a real sense of safety and security. And I don't think it's as easy as just saying, okay, I choose not to do that anymore. I'm just going to let it go. I think often there's trauma underneath, or there's, your family of origin story or your childhood has a lot to do with it as well. I'm constantly saying to my older sister, like, you just need to chill out. Like, just don't worry about it anymore. Oh, just don't even think about it. And she's like, I can't not think about it. I'm the oldest, right? So even like birth order has a lot to do with it. But I do also think that we have more control and influence over that decision than we give ourselves credit for. So when I talk about mindset stuff, whether it be through the money tracking work that I do or in work with people about their businesses, one of the things that we do when we spot a mindset thing or a belief or something that might feel like a limitation or an excuse is we look at it and pay attention to it and then make a decision. Do I want to keep this or do I want to let it go? And I think that that is so applicable here as well. That sense of, okay, but I'm just a real perfectionist, and if it's not done my way, then it makes my eye twitch. Okay, well, is that an experience I want to hold on to, or is that something I want to let go? Do I really think that the best answer, therefore, is to load myself up and have eye twitches all the time? Or is the best response for me right now to learn how to see it done, not quite right, but love on the fact that it's done and I didn't have to do it? I even noticed this for myself in situations in the household because David is just really used to deferring to me and asking me for advice on stuff. He loves having a sounding board. He loves having someone else to help make a decision. But something that caused a bit of frustration for me a couple of years ago, especially because I was in the worst of my post-surgery chronic fatigue and like liver stuff, and I just was not at all capable of making a lot of decisions or getting my brain to work well, was I noticed he was more and more asking me what to do about things or which option to buy. So, for example, he would come and say, what coloured towels do you want me to get for the guest room? And so I would say, get blue ones. Not because I actually was attached to blue ones or cared about what colour the towels were, but because I just don't like getting into that back and forth of like, I don't care, you decide. No, I don't care, you decide. I don't like that. I don't like that. We're wasting our time here. Someone make a decision. I'm happy to be the decision maker. I'm happy to decide and be wrong and be like, I made the wrong decision. Sorry. I'd rather do that than sit idling around or going around in circles without a decision made. So that decisiveness that I have means that the more he asks me, the more I just give a straight answer. But the more I answer, the more he thinks I have an opinion. And so I was actually creating an environment in which David felt like he had to ask me for every little decision. And it was getting teenier decisions that he was asking for my advice on. And so in noticing my own frustration of like, why is he asking me on this? Like, I started to be like answering the question, but as he walked away, I was like, why the hell did he ask me? Like, he could have decided on that. And so I started playing with and experimenting with different ways of responding that let him know I could help him if he needed. I'd be happy to make the decision, but if he could help save me from having to make the decision, then that would actually be far more helpful to me. I'd prefer not to be involved than to actually be involved in that decision. But I also then had a lot of mindset stuff popping up about not being involved in all of the decisions, and that safety feeling of, well, if I get asked every question, at least I'll know exactly where we're going with everything. And so, that's that whole, do I want to hold on to this or am I ready to let this go? And at that point in time, I was so sick and I was so done and I was so exhausted that I really wanted to let it go and I was ready to let it go. And I am so, so, so grateful that that was something that I experimented and played with at that point in time, because now David is far less likely to come and ask me for my advice on something or ask me to help with something that he could absolutely figure out himself. And even when he does come to me, I'm paying attention to whether I really have an opinion or not, or whether I'm just giving an opinion to get it taken care of. And so it's created so much more self-awareness. But I had to be willing to experience that sense of discomfort around like, oh, he's going out to buy new sheets. I hope he buys the right ones. What do you mean the right ones, Tash? You don't care, right? And it's just that reminder for myself that either I don't care what kind of sheets he gets, or even if I do care what kind of sheets he gets, like, do I care enough to go back to that default arrangement where I have to make a bunch of decisions in order to get a say about the sheets? Or would I rather live with sheets that weren't necessarily my first choice, but I also don't have to make any decisions here? I can tell you from personal experience that living a blissful, chilled out existence where I don't have decision fatigue and I don't have to make all of those decisions is a far more enjoyable, far more pleasurable experience of life. I know that when I'm 75, 80 years old, reflecting on my life and how well I lived it, that I am not going to look back on the guest towels that David purchased in 2021 with regrets that we didn't get the blue color instead of the watermelon color, right? I am not going to be impacted by those decisions in the big picture grand scheme of things. So why would I let them keep me tied to life now where I have to be involved in every decision, where I am really controlling, but, that's just who I am, or where, I've just got these perfectionist standards. The standards of what color of towel I have nothing to do with the total quality of my life that I get to live. And instead, if I can put that decision-making power into my business, into creating an amazing life experience for us into crafting and holding the flame of this amazing vision of where we're going, I would much rather put it there than on these minuscule, piddly little decisions that really, in the grand scheme of things, add up to nothing. And that's not to say that all of those little decisions are unimportant or that I don't actually appreciate David making them for me. I know someone's got to make a decision. I'm just really grateful that in a lot of cases now, it doesn't have to be me, but I created that experience for myself. I was mindful about how I was creating that experience between the two of us and how I was contributing to his almost learned helplessness by always having the answer, by always having an opinion. And before ever giving an opinion, if I just stop and assess, is this something that I actually want to be involved in making a decision on? Is he coming to me because he wants me to help be a sounding board? Is he coming to me because he needs direction, right? Like, I need to assess what the question is actually about and have a bit more of a discussion about that first. That is actually the most powerful way for us to communicate with each other. And it also means that David doesn't still feel like I am judging him for his decisions or that he can do something wrong, right? I don't want to create this household environment in which David's constantly in fear of making the wrong decision, because the color of towels can never be the wrong decision, ultimately. Yes, I might not like the color scheme right now, but as I said, when I'm 75, 80 years old, I'm not going to care. And he always makes great decisions anyway. I'm not trusting him. I'm not empowering him if I am constantly taking that away and just swooping in and doing it for him. And Eva, you asked for more of my thoughts on this. And so here are some more random thoughts. There was a certain term that you talked about, retiring your partner, that I wanted to narrow in on in your question as well, because I do want to say that when I first started my business, retiring David from having to have a job was absolutely a big goal, and it was something that excited me and was a big focal point for me. And so it was something I was anxious to do as quickly as possible. I was excited to do as quickly as possible. And I was trying to collect evidence that I could do it as soon as possible as well. And being someone who is a bit of an impulsive decision maker, who is very risk tolerant, I told David to quit his job really early. Like, it was my first 5-figure month, and we were already starting to make plans for him to quit his job. My second 5-figure month, he had given his notice. And we didn't really, in the business, have sustainability of that income. We'd just had 2 good months in a row, and I was about to embark upon eroding all of that amazing cash flow by diving into creating a group program far too soon. So what ended up happening was, not only did I put a lot of unnecessary pressure on my business to sustain its cash flow after just a few months, but there were other challenges that came with having David not having a job that I never really thought through, and I don't think we really had a good grasp on or understanding of at the time. So I wanted to talk about this because I do think it's something that gets a bit glossed over, and a lot of online content creators talk about retiring their partner. I don't really love that term, but they talk about retiring their partner through this really beautiful romantic lens and this glossy kind of image of what it looks like. But I don't necessarily think that the reality is like that straight away. And there's a lot of work that goes into re-navigating how the relationship works, but also how the household works and how you focus on your business when you now have a partner at home with you that's not going to work, but also they're not bringing in any financial contribution into the household. Our plan when David quit his job was that he was going to play and explore starting a business of his own of some kind, and that we would just live off my business income until he found his feet and figured it out. And we were going to be walking on the beach all the time and have this amazing relationship and be super fit and healthy and out in the sun and swimming. And it was that environment. We were living on the beach. We were a block from the beach. We had a gorgeous little 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment. We definitely had a lot more downtime together, but there was a lot that happened for David that I never even realized was going to happen. So if you said to me when I was working in corporate in a full-time role, hey, I'm going to support you financially, go and start your business, which is exactly what David did. I'm like, yeah, and I'm hungry and I'm learning stuff and I'm eating up all the information I can find and I'm trying things and I'm getting out there and failing and making mistakes as quickly as possible. David doesn't work that way. And so when he was working from home, when he was trying to start his own business, I bought him a course on how to start a business. It was run by a dude. So like he wasn't seeing me as his business mentor and, it wasn't going to create any friction between us of what he should do. But he was really lost and he didn't know what he was doing. And he felt really hopeless and helpless because he was putting pressure on himself to try and contribute. And he spiraled into depression real fast. David is a movie buff and was obsessed with movies. And yet in the year that we lived at the beach, after he had quit his job, he went to the movies like 3 times that year. That was it. And that was with me a couple of times a week, encouraging him to go to the movies. So we hadn't really planned what we were doing very well at all. I think if I could go back and do it again, I would definitely make sure that we had far more saved up from the business income as well as David's wages. Like if we were able to live off the business, we should have done that for 3 months before deciding that David could quit his job. And we just put all of his wages away, right? Like just save them up. That's totally fine. But we'd had 2 good income months in a row in the business. And instead of ensuring that we could actually sustain that, and we didn't even save that money, we spent that money because I just operated from the assumption that that's what my business made now. So money was spent. And then taking David's wage away, but also taking away his sense of purpose each day of going to work and working, it made a huge impact on the vibe in the house. It had a huge impact on the way that I worked as well. So I'm someone who vocalizes things out loud to kind of think things through. And so when David was at work and I was working on my business, I was saying stuff out loud and making ideas out loud and talking about problems out loud. And having David in the house with me now, when I would talk about problems out loud, he would come and try and help me. But that's not why I was doing it. And I couldn't have my mindset sessions with my mindset practitioner in my office. I would have to go and sit in the car if I wanted to talk anything privately because we're in a little 2-bedroom apartment. It was lovely, but it was not soundproof. There were no soundproof spaces in there. And then also just the energy of having someone sitting there in the house while you're trying to get stuff done, or that sense of being seen. So here I was now, the only income earner for the house. And so I often found myself sitting at my desk just staring at my screen, and they'd be like, what am I doing? And it's like I would normally, if no one else was there, I'd probably turn the television on for a minute, or I would listen to a YouTube video, or I'd go and mix things up to get back into the creative flow. But because I had that sense of, well, David can see what I'm doing, I needed to look like I was being diligent. I needed to perform. And so I performed being a really hard worker a lot of the time, but actually I wasn't necessarily working in a way that was most aligned for me. I wasn't actually being productive. I wasn't actually creating the right work environment. And, it's been a real source of gorgeous connection for the two of us and some huge discussions having experienced that together, because in leaving that place and in moving again, we could really reflect and see that, David was really struggling, and he identified that he didn't realize at the time how miserable he would feel having such a lack of purpose, but also like that sense of having all of the time in the world and your partner is rushing and they're trying to get everything done. And, they are clearly stressed out and they're clearly trying to get stuff done that they don't have time for. And yet here you are and you don't know what to do and you don't have anything to do. and you don't even feel like you deserve to go to the movies. So you're feeling all dark and dismal. So you know that your negative energy is kind of contributing to the pressure, but you can't actually release it. You can't fix it because there's no tangible solution. And so I do think that when it comes to managing the relationship and thinking about retiring a partner or bringing in household help or having someone else in your space, I do think that it's important we have these conversations out loud, because I do, as I said, I think that it gets glossed over quite a bit. And every person who has their partner working in their business says, oh, it's way harder than I ever expected, and if I had my time again, I probably wouldn't do it. But, I'm really glad that we did and we've figured it out, but I don't recommend it. Like, I don't know a lot of people whose partner works with them and has done so for over a year who is like, it's the best thing we ever did. I don't know anyone who says that. And it is amazing the way that we do it now, absolutely. And it is for us. It was amazing, and it was the best thing that we ever did to choose this life of freedom. That absolutely was the best thing we ever did. But not having a plan of what David would actually do with his days and not thinking through some of the logistics and the work environment stuff, I think really it's held us back for quite a while. And it just meant that it was really tricky for us to navigate. David openly says now when friends talk about it, like, he was so used to being the breadwinner, the provider in all of his previous relationships. And even, that made him feel really amazing when he was able to say to me, like, yeah, go start your business. We can live off my wage. That was a time where he felt the most comfortable, was when he was the provider. And he didn't realize how much of his identity was wrapped up in being that provider and what an impact it would have when that role was taken away. But not only that, the role was taken away and he was then thrust into this situation where he felt like he needed to start something new, or he needed to come up with something else, and he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know what to do. And he's not necessarily the same kind of operator as I am. And so that kind of created a bit of difference and, friction between the two of us as well. When he said to me, okay, just stay home, start your business. You can do it full time. Quit your job, start your business. I became a diligent student of business, and I'm someone who I go out and make a bunch of mistakes, and I'm trying everything, and I'm learning as much as I can, and I'm eating it all up, and I'm reporting back to him proactively at the end of every day. Here's what I did. Here's what I learned. I made a sale. And that's just the kind of person that I am. And so even for me, when he then stopped working and he was starting his own business, and for 2 weeks, he didn't tell me one thing he had done. He didn't report back anything. There was no conversation. I would sometimes say, how's it coming along? Is there anything you want to talk about? He's like, no, it's all good. I'm just doing my modules. And I found that really, really challenging because, it's just, we just do things differently. And David is also neurodivergent, but he has a lot of different neurodivergence to me. And so for me, that has been, a big, big part of our relationship together, and navigating some of those big changes and those big picture decisions. That has been a really significant part of the role that I play in our relationship, and that I am very happy to be the flame keeper for. I am very happy to be responsible for and holding on to and creating the vision of where we're going, big picture, the vision of what the lifestyle is that we're building, the vision of how this is all going to operate together. If I sat back and expected or relied upon David to do any of that, I don't think we would actually be as far along as we are. And also, I don't think it would be us in our zones of genius. That is my zone of genius. And understanding what makes David tick and what works for him and, how he operates is something that I am now a very diligent student of. But when I first told him to quit his job and when he first was then at home full time, I just assumed he would just do what I did because he'd seen me do it over the course of the previous 6 months. And I just assumed, oh, don't we all do it that way, right? And so that was really fascinating for me to then actually acknowledge and see. I just expected David to be a Tash instead of us clarifying what exactly would his role be How would he create that sense of contribution if he wasn't contributing financially? What level of communication did we need to ensure that we're on the right track and that we're both comfortable with how this is going? And, we really didn't do stuff like that back then. And nowadays we are far, far more diligent about it, but not because David says to, not because David is more diligent about it, but because I know that that's what we need and I am willing to take responsibility for that part. So when recently we started a different diagnosis journey for David with his neurodivergence, I was up until 11 o'clock at night some nights in bed with my little AirPods in, he's asleep next to me, and I'm watching YouTube video after YouTube video about this different type of neurodivergence and what that means in relation to the structure that he needs and what will be really helpful in empowering him and helping him to navigate this. And, what do partners of people with this neurodivergence need to learn and understand? And, that sort of stuff I am absolutely willing to take on. And I do that because that is my zone of genius. That is my role in this relationship. I am the flame keeper. I will say that over and over and over again. I'm the flame keeper of that vision, of how our relationship works, of what we're achieving together, of what our life is, the big picture stuff around where we live and the house that we have and all those pieces. That's something that I hold tight and strong, and I'm consistently bringing us back onto that pathway because that's the role that I play. And I don't underestimate the value of the role that David plays in meal making and decision making and those things, and taking care of Munchkin's vet stuff and being the communication person for the gas company and, all of that. I think because I've been that person, I was married before I was with David and I was that person. And so I don't underestimate the time and energy and brain space that takes up. And I am completely grateful that that is no longer my responsibility and I don't have to do any of that anymore. But that means that I'm taking on something else. That means that I still have a big contribution to make, and it's not just the finances. That's where I think, we see a lot of this in the traditional gender roles where the man's contribution is the money and the wife's contribution is everything else, right? And I don't think that that's ever the right model. So I don't aspire to just be the man who just contributes the money. That's not my aspiration. I don't want David to be responsible for every other thing and I provide the money, so therefore I am free of any kind of responsibility at all. I don't want to create that. I want to create a relationship in which we have a shared vision of where we're going, where we are both operating in our zone of genius and both operating in the relationship in a way that feels like we are really heard, we are really supported, we are connected, we are acknowledged, we are appreciated by the other person for the contribution that we make, and where we're working towards that joint vision. That's the kind of relationship that I want, and that's the kind of relationship that we want, that we have discussed over and over and over again and finessed and refined over the last few years. And that's something that I am really passionate about talking about openly, because it hasn't been just this easy breezy romantic experience. It has taken some friction and rearranging things and trying things out differently. And, some of the strategies that I've even tried to communicate what I need from David, or, talk about household management and decision fatigue and I need someone to take the load. Sometimes I've brought that up in conversations and it's just completely fallen on deaf ears because David doesn't comprehend or understand or know what to do with that information. So I can't just dump it on him and then expect him to kind of figure it out and sort it. It needs to be something that we do as a couple. It needs to be something that we do together. So hopefully that's more of my thoughts that you were hoping for, Eva. If you have any follow-up questions about them, please do let me know. And I think it's something where we certainly need to continue the conversation, and it's always so much more nuanced. I'm not someone who ever professes to know what it's like to be a mum. or what it's like to live with other forms of marginalization or have other pressures. I only know like my lived experience, and I can witness other people's experiences, but I think that that's very different to living it. And so, yeah, I love hearing all of the different perspectives on conversations like this. So thank you, Eva. And so, Eva, question 13 leads perfectly into question 14, which came in from Nadja Roethlisberger, I think is how you say it. Nadja is from Praxis Raum und Zeit and is a naturopath in Switzerland with patients one-on-one and selling online courses and a book. And Nadja's question is so related because she asked, can you explain why people from marginalized backgrounds have to work hard on their mindset when others who come from privilege never really need to work on theirs? Why do they simply just make money and they don't need to do any self-reflection? They just make money. And yet when someone is marginalized, on top of all the things that they have to do, they have to work on their mindset and shift their energy and clear their aura and do all these extra things as well. And actually, Nadja, I think the answer to your question is in the question, right? And it comes from that space of that sense of privilege. Privilege creates entitlement. Now, I will say that I am not someone who teaches in this space in relation to marginalization and privilege and unpacking systemic marginalization issues and those sorts of things. I definitely have people I recommend that you follow, and I'll link to some of them in the show notes. That would be people like Natasha Bamblett, Louise O'Reilly, and Leslie Crudup Villa Garcia. So I know there's lots and lots of people. So I will link to a bunch of people in the show notes of today's episode. But I also just wanted to share my reflection, even just in the way that the question was asked. It kind of gives you the answer. And that is that when people are living and working in an environment and in a system that was built by people like them for people like them, well, they have that sense of this was built for me. So it's easier for example, men in corporate environments to just feel like they're entitled to the next job promotion. The system is built for them because it actually is. And so they don't have imposter syndrome because they're not an imposter there. Whereas if you're a woman in a male-dominated industry, then when it comes to showing up and speaking up and being seen and talking about your accomplishments, you're going to have a imposter syndrome because you are an imposter there. You're not who that system or structure was built for. And so therefore, you are going to have microaggression after microaggression and reminder after reminder, hey, you don't belong here. Hey, this is not for you. Hey, we don't normally have people like you experience this level of wealth. And so that is why we experience all of those things. We've taken that on board and we live and operate and work in a society that in most cases still to this day tells us that we are less than, tells us we deserve less, tells us that we aren't as good, tells us that our traits and our natural way of being is not to succeed, tells us that we are getting an extra leg up in order to be able to succeed in this space. So that can create issues as well. Like to me, it's like that's why the fact that privilege and marginalization exists is the exact reason why, unfortunately, for those of us who've experienced marginalization, we will continue to need to do that mindset work and, work through that in order to navigate what it feels like to be part of a system and successful in a society that doesn't inherently really want us to succeed, or that wasn't built for our success is probably a more accurate answer. And so it sucks. It does. It absolutely sucks. And I can feel the frustration in the way that you ask your question. And I absolutely reflect and share that frustration with you. I also know for myself that having experienced marginalization because of my gender, because of my gender identity, because of other physical aspects of my experience as well, that I then have a lot more empathy and understanding for those who experience even more complex and even deeper marginalization. So, for example, I acknowledge that I have the privilege of being white, having grown up in Australia, having university level education. And so it's important for me to not forget what I've been through in terms of my marginalization, because that reminds me to bring people with me. That reminds me to acknowledge and unpack and see where I have privilege that even other people don't have, right? So as a white woman in Australia, I don't have to unpack all of the imposter syndrome, all of the microaggressions, all of the structural ways that I've been disadvantaged because of my skin color. And so I can't even imagine what it would be like to have that on top of what I've experienced or instead of what I've experienced. And so that, for me, is why I'm an intersectional feminist. That is why intersectionality is something that I talk about and I focus on so much, because in Australia, for example, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were classified as animals when Australia was discovered, right? Oh, don't even get me started. The history that is taught or was taught when I was a child at school is just astounding. And so, like, there's always layers, there's always intersections of those experiences. And so whilst it's really frustrating for me to see, yep, straight white men, they don't have to worry about nothing, they've got it easy, they don't have money blocks, they don't have imposter syndrome because they're not an imposter. They're in a system that was built for them, right? That's very frustrating. And it can really feel like sometimes, oh, it's unfair for me. By acknowledging my own privilege, such as the privilege of being white, the privilege of being based in Australia, the privilege of having tertiary education, I have advantages that other people in the heart centre community don't have. And so I take that then to be a responsibility on my part to ensure that I'm not contributing to or proliferating marginalization of other people, and also that I am contributing to the dismantling of that privilege system, the dismantling of that patriarchy. And so it kind of comes in two pieces, right? Yes, it's frustrating that people who experience marginalization have far more mindset work that we need to do. But because we've done that, we understand what it's like to feel like you have to work harder to get the same result, or, there's more layers to uncovering why we're blocking ourselves or where we're holding ourselves back, or, where the system and ourselves are holding ourselves back. And so for me, that makes me even more fired up to dismantle patriarchy and to dismantle the privilege system. And I think also it means that I can look at the experiences of other people who've experienced marginalization with far more understanding and far more grace. And if there's any way that I can even that out or make that easier for others, then of course I'm going to do that. So I need to understand, maybe I'm inflicting microaggressions on people and I don't realize, well, that's my responsibility, because I wish the men that I had worked with in my early corporate career had acknowledged and understood their privilege, but they didn't. I wish that a lot of the men who are in the online business space would acknowledge their privilege, but they don't. And we dismantle these things through multiple angles, right? Yes, it's going to take people with power to dismantle the systems that keep them in power, but also we have a role to play ourselves in educating each other, supporting each other, ensuring we don't further contribute to that marginalization for other people. And so we can kind of fast track this movement for those who come next, so that they'll have less experience of feeling like an imposter. And a great tangible example of this is owning a business, when I started my business, I didn't know a lot of people who started their own business. And I certainly didn't know a lot of people who started a service-based business, right? The people in my life who I knew had started a business, they'd bought a cafe or they had set up a lawn mowing business. I was making stuff up in my brain and then teaching people. Like, for me, it was such a huge undertaking to start my own business. But when I think of the kids of some of my clients and their experience of growing up in an entrepreneurial household, and their mum had a business and that's what they remember and that's what they know and that's normalized, and their family had open conversations about money mindset and patriarchy and privilege and systemic marginalization. Oh my gosh, think about we're one generation away from a huge, magical, momentous shift in the experience of mindset blocks, money blocks, that belief about what's possible and what's available to us. And that next generation, think about them coming from that platform and then what the generation after them will then be capable of. And so I even see it in my niece and nephew and the way that they speak about certain concepts or things like investing and politics, that when I was a child, I was obsessed with politics, but I was told over and over again it was not my place to discuss it because I wasn't 18 and I'm not allowed to vote yet. And so what do I know? Let the adults talk. And now seeing my niece and nephew and, my friends' kids having conversations about abortion and bodily autonomy and decisions being made in politics about their futures that they don't get a say in, and being encouraged to explore those concepts. I get teary thinking about how much change has been facilitated from generation to generation to generation. I think about from my grandma to my mum and dad to me, the change, oh my goodness, right? But change is getting faster and faster. And so I am going to contribute to that change, and I'm mindful about my contribution to that change. And part of that contribution is unpacking my own privilege, is unpacking how I might be contributing to patriarchal, hierarchical, marginalization systems. And by doing so, I know that I'm being for other people what I wish that the people who upheld privileged systems around me would have been. I didn't get that from them, but I can certainly be that for other people. And so, yes, it is a cause for frustration, but I hope, Nadja, that this conversation is also a spark of inspiration and a spark of excitement and possibility, because I really do see that we are changing the world simply by having businesses, simply by working on the mindset, simply by understanding the differences that we experience and speaking about it out loud and having open and honest conversations. So thank you so much for your question. It tied in so beautifully with Eva's question. And that was question number 14, if anyone is looking for Nadja or some of those notes in the show notes. And the final question that came in for episode number 400 is from the gorgeous Paula Rajaratnam. And she supports soul-led entrepreneurs to get back in touch with their inner GPS so they can live their best life and run their business with clarity and confidence through the lens of human design. And Paula asks, as you know, I'll be relocating to the UK. My question is about what things I need to do to keep my business ticking during the transition. I will need to take a few weeks off to relocate and settle. So I'm wondering what things I can put in place to ensure that I don't disappear off Facebook algorithms and lose contact with my clients. I guess this could also apply to anyone who's traveling for long periods as well. And I will, Paula, link back to a podcast episode that I did on how I prepared for an extended break from my business, because there's lots of very practical things in there. But the other thing I do want to say, I won't repeat all of what's in that podcast episode. I'll just link to it in the show notes with question number 15. But I do want to say, like, I think the biggest thing that I witness when people need to take extended time off their business, or they see a big life change is coming, or there's a lot going on, is that we just aren't very practiced at giving ourselves grace and space. And I want that for you. I want you to be so kind to yourself and give yourself so much grace and so much freedom and so much softness and gentleness, because you deserve it. And because there is no amount of algorithm feeding that is worth you sacrificing your sleep. There is no client upkeep or connection that is worth you being mean to yourself and burning yourself out. You are going through a significant change. It's not just the relocation. It's the emotional experience. It's the energetic experience. I know when I've moved countries each time running my business, my body has moved, and my brain and my soul and my energy takes about 4 weeks to land, right? The flight may take 12 hours for my body, but for my emotions and my soul and my energy, takes a lot longer. It's about a 4-week flight. And so I want you to just give yourself as much space as you can. And I also want you to know that your followers love you so much. There's no problem if you disappear. Your clients are so grateful for the work that you do that if you reach out to them and say, look, this is a huge change that's happening, I'm moving countries, it's likely to be 1 to 2 months of being really haphazard, and I don't know that I'm going to be particularly reliable, I don't believe that a single client of yours would be angry or upset or tell you off or anything at all. The reason why we feel like we need to hold space for everyone, even when we're going through one of the biggest, most intense changes of our lives, is because I think we are so used to looking after other people's feelings that we forget how beautiful it is when someone gives us the opportunity to give grace to them. It is one of my favorite things when a service provider or someone, mastermind friend sends me a message and says, I'm so sorry, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it today's session. I actually am overjoyed at receiving that message. Not because I didn't want to see them, not because, I didn't want to work with them. I'm overjoyed because I know that they're choosing themselves. And I'm a bit teary saying this, but I know that that was a hard call for them to make. And I want to support it. And I love the opportunity to be able to support it and to be able to say, oh my gosh, no worries at all. I was just thinking I'd love to go and do some pottery this afternoon. You just gave me the afternoon off. And I am teary saying that because I know myself how tough it can be to send the email and say, I don't think I'm going to make it. I'm so sorry. To send that message. And in my head, I feel like I'm letting them down and they're going to be so angry and they're going to be so disappointed. And I've never felt that way when my friends cancel on me. I've never felt that way when my clients cancel or when my providers choose themselves. So why am I assuming they would feel that way about me? It's kind of mean when you think about it to assume that people are going to be angry at you for staying home when you feel sick or for cancelling a session because you don't have the capacity to do it. It's so weird that we do this. And I just want you to, at any point in time throughout this process, if you need space and you've got this going on, I just want you to come back to remembering this conversation And remember that you are gifting someone the opportunity to contribute to you choosing to look after yourself or choosing yourself. And I want you to think about Teary Tash making this podcast, thinking of Paula, because I 100% believe that if you disappeared from our Facebook for 6 weeks, we'd miss you, right? We will miss you. You are a joyful presence in our lives. We will miss you. But we won't be upset at you. We will completely understand, and we would prefer that you look after you, because we never know really what's going on for other people. We never really know what's going on behind the scenes. But I can tell you with absolute confidence that whenever anyone cancels on me, they hated it, right? They were like, oh, they thought about it. It was a big decision. It's the same for me. I am twisting and bending and convincing myself, no, I don't have to cancel. No, I don't have to cancel. And then I'm like, no, I definitely have to cancel. And then I actually do it. And it's such a big thing to choose yourself. And we all are here. Every person listening to this podcast is thinking the same thing. We are all here sending you so much love and so much gentleness and kindness. And I just want you to choose yourself. I want you to look after yourself. And I want you to remember that we will not resent you for it. We will not be angry about it. In fact, it will be a joy for us to support you in taking that extra time. And, absence makes the heart grow fonder. It just means when we get you back, we're going to be even more excited and thrilled at it. And we are even more pumped and joyful and ready to support you to get back up and get things running again. All of the practical stuff is in the other episode, right? Like all the other stuff, like schedule some things and da-da-da. Like I could tell you all the technical stuff in this episode, but that's not what's important to share with you here, because what is so, so important is that you look after Paula. And remember, not only does Paula deserve it, but every client wants you to choose you. Every follower wants you to choose you. And we support you in that decision, and we encourage that decision, and we look forward to seeing you out the other side, landed and feeling grounded again and feeling ready to come back. And we're really excited when you do. So thank you so much for asking that question. I can't believe I cried on bloody podcast again, but I'm not going back and re-recording that. So you'll all have to just put up with it. Sorry, everyone. And thank you so much, Paula, for giving me the opportunity to give you that little lecture and to share that little conversation. And I, honestly, part of the reason why I get so emotional about it, talking about it and teary sharing is because it's the message I need to hear over and over again as well, right? Sometimes we just need to hear it over and over again for it to really land, and that's okay. That's okay. We're undoing a lot of programming and a lot of, past experiences telling us that that's not the done thing and that's not the right thing to do, or that we don't deserve it, or that we have to earn it or work harder for it, or whatever it might be. And so there's a lot of undoing that we need to do. And so we sometimes need to be reminded over and over again. And I'm happy to be one of the people who contributes to that reminder. We are almost at a 3-hour episode. How spectacular is this? Thank you so much to everyone who submitted a question. Thank you so much to every listener who's ever listened to an episode of the Heart Centre Business podcast. There's probably not going to be a lot of people who listen to this one because it goes for 3 hours, but hopefully the question askers at least get to listen to my responses. And I really do love and adore being able to create these podcasts. I love and adore the standard of questions that people ask and the range of questions that people ask. So thank you so much to everyone who contributed. Thank you to everyone who listens. The Heart Centre Business podcast is here to stay. I have so much more to say. I can't believe I haven't run out of ideas at 400 episodes, but I reckon I've got another 400 in me at least. So stay tuned for those. A quick mention that we have the Client Attraction Challenge starting on the 22nd of April, and it is going to be absolutely magnificent and spectacular. And I want everyone to come and join us because it's going to be so much fun. So make sure you go and check that one out. I'll put the link in the show notes as well. And also just a quick note that coming in the next 10 episodes of the podcast, I've got some new free resources. I've got some more episodes that are answering questions that people have asked, but with a bit more structure and depth. So do keep an ear out for the next few episodes of the podcast. I think you're going to find really valuable and practical as well. Thank you so much for joining me for this one. Until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. Big love from me and bye for now. Would you like more tips, tools, and resources to help you grow your heart-centered business? Head to tashcorbin.com today.